I'd like to have a motion to return to open session.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Ask for a vote. Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
I vote yes. We're back in open session. I'm going to report out from executive session. We received legal advice regarding the FY25 budget and the forensic audit. No votes taken. I'm going to ask for a motion to seal the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Ask for a vote. Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes, so the minutes are sealed. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so welcome to our March 26th Tiverton School Committee meeting. Has anyone signed up for open forum?
Yes, sir. Amy Roderick? No? Sarah?
Nope.
Sarah Krieger? No? Amy Mullen?
Amy has the list.
They're scheduled for later.
Okay.
Karen, is anyone from the public on there, not our staff?
No.
Okay, they're going to be introduced later.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Jerry, you want to go over the process tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda first.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. I'll second that.
Ask for a vote. Mrs. Palish?
Yes.
Mrs. Pavo?
Yes.
Mrs. Farnworth?
Yes.
Mr. Dakotas?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Really?
That's the fire alarm. I'm only saying that. I'm only saying that.
No? No fire? Good. All
Maybe
right.
somebody's ringing a bell.
So again, welcome to our March 26th meeting. I just want to go over a little bit of the agenda. We're going to hear from the head of school aid from the Rhode Island Department of Education. We're going to talk a little bit more about the FY25 budget. We will open the floor to comments from the public. I do implore you to resist the overwhelming temptation to call out. This is a public meeting, but we do need to follow the rules of parliamentary procedure so that everyone's voice is heard and we have a full-throated discussion of all the topics on our agenda tonight, some of which concern, I know, many of you. But we do welcome you. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask for a motion to move up item 7A, review bonds held at Fort Barton, receive information from Mario Carreno, Director of the School Building Authority.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Anyone opposed? I'll take it as unanimous. So welcome, Mr. Carreno. I don't know if you're on with us yet. Okay. You can hear us okay? So I think what the committee was looking for was some insight into how the current bonds are structured at Fort Barton, as well as sort of different obligations that we would have if we... Okay, and Mrs. Palish has a list of questions, but maybe you could just give us an overview of where Fort Barton stands right now.
Sure. So your three elementary schools, all the money around the same time, those bonds and the
Can we turn that up, Danny?
of that is about $5.8 million in personal payments, just over $600,000 school housing aid, which is continuing to reimburse the project at the time of the service. At the moment, you would expect to get around $1.8 million in housing aid over the next 4 years, not including the initial school years. There's an opportunity that if you were to pay off the next 4 years, something you do ahead of time, you could avoid paying over $600,000 in interest. It just goes right to the lending institution. It doesn't have any impact on your schools. In these scenarios where you express these payments from 4 years to 1, we will then also express our housing aid payments from 4 years to 1, because the state also shares in you avoiding your interest payments. So in this example, if you were to pay off all 4 years, between now and say June 30th, then we would expedite $1.8 million of housing aid into FY25, and then everyone avoids over $600,000 in remaining interest payments for those bonds. So at a high level, that's how what's at stake and available for Tiverton.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Palish, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. I did, just for the committee's edification, I did actually email these to Mario ahead of time because I did want him to have them. One of the things I
Deb, you may want to get closer to your microphone.
One of the things I had asked. One of the things I had asked, at the last meeting was I actually wanted to make sure that we have all the facts when we're making decisions. So my questions are around getting the facts. So Mario, if we close the school with outstanding bonds, would that make those bonds immediately callable?
So that's not a trigger point to having them callable. These bonds are already callable, meaning that the town has the ability to either pay them off or refinance them. That usually happens after a 10-year mark. What does happen is if you were to close the school and have remaining payments, the state immediately stops any remaining housing aid. So we would figure out how much of that 1.8 million that I had just referenced belongs to Fort Barton as an example, and then we would immediately cut off the payments for that school. Still have to pay it back, but the state aid doesn't, no longer comes.
Correct. But it doesn't become immediately callable. So my understanding is absolutely what you just explained, and that was explained to us at our last meeting, that we would lose aid reimbursement. Can the buildings be used for any other education use and still qualify for the reimbursement? Not necessarily by the school department, but perhaps a municipal use like adult education?
Has to remain under the care and control of the school committee as a school.
So it has to be used by schools? Okay, thank you. So you had mentioned, and I'm sorry because it's very hard to hear you here, that if we pay off the bonds by June 30th, that the town does receive the remaining housing aid as long as they're currently used as schools? Yes? So, okay. So how much is that for Fort Barton? Do you know or no?
I'd have to pull it up. I had emailed Dr. Sanchioni a week ago. I don't know if you have it available, Dr. Sanchioni, but I know the total for all three is around 1.8 of remaining housing aid. I don't have the exact number in front of me of what portion that is. I can check my emails, but you may have it, Dr. Sanchioni.
Okay, I'm hearing about 800,000, which that sounds right if you're talking about 3 schools. Those were the questions I had, so I will turn the floor over to the others.
Okay. I'll give the floor to other committee members. Mrs. Pavo? Anything? Okay. Ms. Farnworth?
I'm going to be very honest, I really couldn't hear very well, so I'm going to have to go back and watch Mr. Carreno's presentation, hopefully online. It'll come through a little clearer.
Yeah, you might want to get closer to the microphone too. It's a somewhat different.
Can you hear me?
Yep. I think I can. All right. Mr. Dakotas?
I think that I just want to make sure out of that 1.8, Deb, I know it's hard to hear in there because of the acoustics. Did you say how much it was for just Fort Barton? I couldn't hear down here.
About 800K.
800K. All right, that was my question. Thank you.
So again, to clarify, Mr. Carreno, there's 1.8 million you say on the Fort Barton bonds, or is it, no?
Of state aid, so you have three, I think it's 2 or 3 bonds that combined remaining debt service payments just on the principal is around 5.8 million. The state aid piece is around 1.8 of that piece, right? The state doesn't reimburse all the bonds; it only reimburses the percentage of your bonds. And then of that amount, there's an additional 610,000 of interest payments that it's really what could be saved here, right? If you were able to pay off those bonds, again, in the next 3 months, those payments go away. If you were going to pay it off, you likely would want to do it this June as opposed to wait to out years, because the way all debt service schedules are structured, the interest starts to like less and less each year. So of the remaining 610,000, almost 300,000 is due in fiscal year 25, and your future savings are smaller. So if you were going to pay it off, you would want to do that now. If not, it would make sense to continue making those payments.
Okay, and so the 5.4 million, that's actually on all 3 elementary schools, so you would have to prorate it at some point or figure out how much was attributable to Fort Barton. That's what you meant by that?
Yeah, and we have that. I don't have it like in front of me. I know I've emailed it to the superintendent in the last week. I can forward it to you, Dr. Larkin, to share with the committee if that would be beneficial.
Yeah.
So the outstanding after, excuse me, as of June 30th of 2024, the remaining balance on specifically the Fort Barton bonds is 2.595 million.
Okay, so 2.5 million, okay. All right, and basically for us and anyone to understand is that while the bond is not necessarily callable, meaning that the holder of the bond couldn't demand payment necessarily as long as the town was continuing to pay the service on the bond, it would no longer be eligible for reimbursement from the state under state aid to housing, school housing. But if the bond were paid off immediately, you would have the state aid would be returned to the town, as well as there would be savings on the interest of the bonds themselves. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Carreno? Otherwise, I think that completes that portion of the agenda. All right, thank you, Mario, for coming and speaking with us. Really appreciate it. So at this point, I would like to, again, open up the discussion to the rest of the committee. We certainly have a lot of things in front of us to decide, and no final decisions have been made right now, but we remain with a troubling budget situation. So I'm going to, Mike, let you go first.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. So I wanted to start by saying that I've lived here for 20 years, and probably the first 10 years that I was here, I was young at the time. I'm not anymore, but I was in my early 30s, and my wife and I bought a house here. We weren't even married yet, and we took some time to acclimate to Tiverton, realized how much we really loved it here because of its scenery and its slow pace of life. We came from Newport, Middletown area, and we really liked being here. I had a stepson at the time who was 9, who attended Tiverton Public Schools, did fantastic. And when our daughters were born, the first one was going into kindergarten in 2015, and I stood at that podium, but it was over there at the meeting, and I kind of shouted at Dr. Larkin and Deb. I'm sorry I did that. But I was really motivated as a parent because I was very, very serious about my daughter going to school all day and as a kindergartner, and the school committee had voted it down. They were keeping half-day K and raised a little noise, and after a couple of meetings, they reversed their decision, and I felt like I'd done something. I paid attention, and I used my voice, and I stood up for something that I believed in, And the new teachers that came in for kindergarten were really thrilled, and the teachers that were here for kindergarten were so happy that they didn't have to have a class in the morning, send them all home, get something quick to eat, and then have another class come in for the afternoon. Now they had their own class all day. And then I joined the PTO at Picasa. I made some lifelong friends. Some of them are sitting here today. We had a lot of fun. We built relationships. We became more grounded and connected to our community. And I tried running for a Charter Review Commission unsuccessfully. I tried to run for Budget Committee unsuccessfully. I did sit for Budget Committee for 2 years. And this long story goes to show that sometimes when you become awake and you open your eyes and you listen and pay attention and you watch YouTube and come to meetings, I know we're all busy, we start to learn a little bit more about our community. And as I sit here today as an elected member of the school committee, I'm going into my last year, my fourth year of my first term. I told myself when I became involved I would stay involved. And I wanted to make sure that I tried to do something good for the town every day I lived here. So if I could hold the door open for somebody, or if I could give $5 to someone canning at the Tom's Market, or I could join the school committee, I wanted to make sure that I did something positive. So as I sit here today, I think I've personally always tried to do the right thing. I wouldn't have come here to get in any type of fights. I mean, we sat here a couple years ago with people that were so angry at us about mask wearing. I mean, I thought the police, I think they had to remove somebody. It was nerve-wracking, and I get it. It was a scary time, and people felt as though we were taking away their civil right, and that was the first time I got exposed to people that were angry and passionate and really turned up about something. And then we had the safety issue last year. A lot of us that are here, especially our administration, we sat here. They were very, very passionate and probably right to be angry, citizens, parents, and we had a discussion. I think the school committee had been very open about that. We sat, we listened, we let everyone that wanted to talk say what they needed. And again, I think the point here is we were always open to working with people, to listening, to taking information, processing information, and trying to make a decision that we thought was the best. Now this year, the kind of the hot thing is the budget, and when the superintendent announced a couple meetings ago that we were looking at 2 budgets, which, you know, to us is picking the best of the worst. Both budgets are not ideal. They both are terrible. And we have this unenviable task to decide which one. Some people might say it's like the election, you know, oh, we have 2 candidates. Why can't we have better candidates, right? So I watched the town council meeting last night, the replay of it at 11:30 at night, because I had a busy night. I had some meetings I had to attend to, and I wanted to make a few comments. So I've served on the budget committee. I've served on the school committee. I don't think I've ever negatively said anything to anyone, whether it's a person sitting in the crowd or it's an elected member. I've never, ever disparaged anyone. If you're on the town council or the budget committee or anything, you're a volunteer to your community. This isn't state level. This isn't Washington. We don't get money put in our pockets by people. We're volunteers who put a lot of time into it. And what I saw last night was a town council that was driven to make the school committee look bad. And this is what I'm here to say. I'm going to speak up for myself. I'll let my peers speak for themselves. We had town council representatives last night say things like, we're in a country club, and they're living in a third world country. Who would say that? Why would you say that? What are you talking about, a country club? We don't even have a water fountain in the library. It's from 1970. What are we talking about? This is a town council member that's been there for 3 months. And you're going to come in and you're going to throw stones at us who have been here for a while. In 2016, we had 23 people in Tiverton run for the town council. We have only had, in 12 years, we have only had 8 school committee members total put their hat in the ring. There's 5 of them here. Carol Herman is not here anymore, Jim Aruda, and we all know Sally Black. 8 people in 12 years have decided to do what we're doing. And it's great that everyone has a voice, and everyone should have the right to do whatever they want and say what they want. But I will tell you this, I have young children. I work full-time. I am married. I'm proud of my children. I'm proud of my school district. I'm proud with the people that I serve with. I'm proud of the superintendent. I'm proud of our financial advisor, Director of Finance. We are not here to pull the wool over your eyes. We are not hiding pockets of money. We are trying our best to give your kids an education. We have amazing educators here. There's some sitting in this room. The last thing we want to do is get rid of staff and get rid of teachers for two reasons. We crush families when we do that. We affect lives. We affect students' lives, especially students that need services. This is a very sensitive subject. And I will tell you, I thought I was going to come in here ranting a little bit. There were some other town council members last night that I felt as though were shooting arrows at us. And I laid in bed, and one of the counselors said they were losing sleep. Well, I didn't sleep last night because I care, and I'm here, and I'm not full of you-know-what. I don't want to lay off any teachers. I don't want to close this school. Now, I'm sorry that I'm ranting. There's a point here. Since I've been paying attention, this town has chronically underfunded the schools. And I'm going to start by telling you that when we had this Tiverton taxpayers group, they made these alternate budgets, and routinely they offered $1. So if you're working and your household expenditures are going up by 5 or 10%, and your employer won't give you a raise, then you probably have to make cuts to keep food on the table, clothes on your children, turn on the heat, pay your car payment, pay your rent, your mortgage, whatever. You do what you need to do. But when that keeps happening, you can't keep up. Nothing stays the same. A Big Mac value meal that was $5 before the pandemic is $13.99, and I go to McDonald's, so I know. And another point, when we tell you that costs are rising, we're not trying to trick you. They are. The bus company, every time we go for a contract, it's not less, it's not the same, it's more. Every time we have to renegotiate salaries, health care, they go up and they go up. And when the town that holds the financial purse strings, which in Tiverton now is the town council, it used to be the budget committee, that isn't like that anymore. We don't have our own money. We don't print our own paper. So we have to ask to be properly funded. And what I will say today, and I won't say it again, is we are running a good school system. I would love it to be great. And there is a loss of students in Middletown, in Portsmouth, in Bristol Warren, and in a lot of districts, people have less children, more people homeschool, more people send their kids to private school. This is the reality of 2024. It's not 1970 where people had 5 kids. This isn't how it is anymore. There are less children. We have to do the best we can to keep the budget in line. Dr. Sanchioni and Amy Roderick give us a monthly update. There's this other weird rumor that goes around that we don't get a line item budget. We get a book like this, and it's got everything spelled out. We do have one. We do discuss it. What happened last night, if you were here or you watched that video, you have a council that is trying to make this school board look inept. And I take offense to that. I would never go to a town council meeting. I would never talk to them like that. I would never try to get the crowd riled up and go after them. That is a tactic that is meant for someone that has an agenda. So I will just say one last thing. We are here to listen. We are peaceful. We are trying our best to solve an issue that we hopefully can all accept. But what we need to do is work together as a town. If the school committee and the town council are going to throw rocks at each other, it's only going to get worse. And if anyone ever is going to think about running for a school committee, would you want to work with town council like that just crucify you? Because that's not right. So I will hold my own opinions from here. I won't raise my voice. I will take your phone calls. I will take your emails. You can stop me outside. I will listen to you. I will not stoop to that level. I will not make comments that are embarrassing and meant to harm and get people fired up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mike. I'm just going to make my comments fairly briefly. Clearly, we're facing two choices. Maybe there's a third somewhere. We just don't see it right now. And, you know, maybe there is a way of getting somewhere with a third choice, but neither of those choices is welcome or palatable. Basically, it's between really stripping every specialist, reducing guidance, really taking away the structure of the school that actually makes it a school versus closing a school. And again, nobody here wants to do either of those things, but unfortunately, the math hasn't changed. And math will come back to bite you. So we've been talking about this deficit for 5 years. Maybe not everybody's been paying attention, but we have been talking about it for 5 years. We continue to have a structural deficit, and we still only have two options right now. One thing I said in our last meeting was, you know, encouraged people to get involved and to, you know, try to understand the process themselves. It's not easy to understand, but try to understand the process. And I said, you know, really it's the voters that can change things, and I do believe that, but I believe it's the voters can change things if they, you know, make their opinions known to the entity that actually can solve this problem. The problem can really only be solved by the budget-making authority of the town, which right now is the town council. So I would encourage you to let them know what you want them to do with the budget. The other thing that is, one thing that has changed, which is, I guess, mathematical, is that the audit has come out and the town actually has a reserve of $18 million. $4 million is already reserved, but there's $14 million that I think, you know, potentially is a source of trying to figure out how we keep Fort Barton open and we maintain our services. So it's the town council that ultimately can solve this problem if they choose to, and we are always happy to work with them. So I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Farnworth next, if you would like to go.
Thank you, Dr. Larkin. I think a couple of my talking points have already been...
Closer, Diane.
Can everyone hear me okay?
It's a little better.
Yep.
It's a little bit. Keep talking.
The acoustics in here are terrible, and I apologize for that.
Get even closer.
Even closer?
Right here.
You know, I just, first of all, I want to reiterate, just like the rest of my colleagues, I think every one of us cares about our position here and about the schools in our town. We all ran at different times, but we all wanted to make positive change for within our schools. I'm in my 8th year at this point, and I've seen a lot in that 8 years of time. The one thing that I do want to express today, and this is, you know, speaking to this structural deficit discussion, you know, there's the feeling that, you know, what have we done about it? Well, We've been, as has been referenced, we've been talking about it for a very long time. We've been knowing that the use of one-time funds was not going to be a sustainable answer. In addition to that, in 2021, Mrs. Polish and I, as individuals, of course, filed a petitioner's budget to add funding to the schools because we did see the issues here. Our town leaders argued that the position, in fact, all the petitions put forth that year should be rejected. Subsequent to that, at our own expense, we challenged that decision in court, and the town, leveraging all of its extensive resources, including its town administrator, fought us tooth and nail, and of course, we lost that challenge. In the year immediately following, the town council pushed through a charter change that would essentially ensure that no one would ever file a petition again, and indeed, no one has filed one since. Since that time, this body, the 5 of us, we've held numerous meetings, some of them dedicated primarily to the structural deficit discussion. We came up with any number of tables, charts, so that we could each have a good level of understanding of what our financial situation was, and to anyone in the audience that they would have that same level of understanding. Unfortunately, during most of those meetings, there was no one in our audience. We were all speaking just to the camera. Indeed, we've never had an actual deficit, and I do want to clarify that. We have not had an actual deficit. What an actual deficit is when you overspend the amount appropriated, and we have never done so. We have always adjusted based upon the funds that we have received. Our structural deficit, however, which has been explained time and time again, is simply an acknowledgement that we are relying on these one-time revenue sources to maintain our operations. The topic of our ongoing structural deficit has been broached each of the last several years during the budget process with both the Budget Committee and the Town Council. We have been fully aware of the fact that we would need to make some cuts this year. Regardless of the outcome, we've been anticipating that. Dr. Sanchioni's budget proposal was to show us what it was going to cost for level service, meaning same amount of teachers, same programs, no changes, right? We had to acknowledge increases in contracts. We had to also acknowledge increases in inflation, as we've all had to deal with. We're also cognizant that we have a maximum that we can request as an increase in our budget, which is 4% above the prior year's town contribution. So our vote 2 weeks ago is exactly for that. With all of that said, I don't think any of us expected the huge hit to state aid, which we've all become familiar with and will continue to talk about. And that's really, in my view, been the tipping event here. So, I just want you to express to you all that we have been working on this for quite a long time. We have been essentially reaching out to our town leaders for many years now. We have, in a couple of instances, received the maximum 4% budget, but certainly not as often as we needed to catch up. With regard to our recent meetings, and including the town council meeting yesterday evening, it pains me to say this, but the lack of professionalism, both during our meetings the last couple of weeks and their own meetings, has been astounding. At least 2 members of the town council have been actively campaigning against our schools and the superintendent on a regular basis. Others have and continue to state publicly that this is our side versus theirs. I heard it last night. They're going to kill our balance sheet. Since when are we not one town? We should be working collaboratively with common goals, planning for the future. Instead, we have endless political pontificating and the shots meant to turn public sentiment to the other side's point of view. Lastly, the governance by rumor spread on social media and otherwise needs to stop. We were elected by the voters of our town to make the decisions in the best interest of the people, and in our case, the students and their families. It's time for us to continue doing that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Farnworth. Mrs. Pavo?
Nothing.
Mrs. Palish?
Am I using this one? So I guess I missed a humdinger of a meeting. I will say that glass half full, I think there's progress. I at least heard several members acknowledging that we do have a structural deficit, and it has been around for several years. They, you know, it's been around longer than Peter. It's being tagged on him. This is my 14th year on the school committee. I can tell you the structural deficit was here before this administration. I remember being at financial town meetings when my son was in middle school, high school, you know, fighting for funding. This has been a continual issue. But this particular structural deficit, this was not caused by this administration. But progress, glass half full, we at least have a couple people admitting that, yes, we do have a structural deficit, and we have been talking about it for 5 years. The town administrator continues to say that we don't have a deficit, we don't have an issue, but I'll count that as progress. The other thing that I did want to address is, other than the $14 million of uncommitted funds in the audit, I dug a little deeper, and I'll tell you why. So the schools ended up with a revenue over expense of a little over $400 million, or $400,000 on a $34 million budget, about 1.4%. On a $34 million budget, that's pretty good. On the municipal side, they overestimated expenses by $1.6 million. They underestimated revenue by $1.5 million. Now, I'm not saying their budget wasn't a good budget, that we miss. You know, sometimes you budget, you use the best numbers you can, and sometimes you miss. That was 14.8% of their budget that they missed on. Overstating revenue, you know, understating revenue, overstating expenses. The reason I say something is because when you have council members calling us liars, cheats, and thieves, and that we don't know how to budget, I'm just not going to sit here and take that. We do our due diligence. We do the best that we can. We work with our financial professionals too. So throwing, you know, your pen across the table certainly creates drama, but it does not help this situation. It does not help this discussion. It does not help this collaboration. Stop telling everyone and saying on social media that we're liars, cheats, and thieves. We are not. And I'm just simply not going to take it. So finally for me, I was doing math while we were talking to Mario. And, you know, as a school committee member, I'm telling you right now, I have absolutely no authority to solve this on my own, but I'm a taxpayer and I'm a parent. So I'm doing the math in my head. So if we pay off the bond, any bond, but Fort Barton bond, that injects almost $1 million of new monies because you get the reimbursement, you free up the interest. If we use our fund balance, which is a little over $1 million, to close the gap, and the council commits to just matching that, we can get through this year. Now, will that solve our problem? Nope, because we're still going to be using one-time funds. But you know what it gives us? The gift of time. Because finally, you're all engaged. And I love it. I love that you're coming. I love that you're engaged and that you're listening and that you understand what we were saying is true. So the community needs to have a discussion. What do you want education to look like? What do you want your schools to look like? What do you want the municipal side? Diane's right. I would never pit our students against our fire and our police and our DPW. I would just never. They're so valuable. One of the things that I've asked for, Ms. Farnworth and I have asked for, is why isn't this town doing financial forecasting? Why aren't we, we have, a $50-something million budget? Why aren't we forecasting revenue out 5 years, forecasting expenses out 5 years, and why aren't we looking at our needs that way and having a community discussion about how much should go to aid, education aid, how much should go to police and fire, but this, we have to start having this discussion. Pitchforks, lighting fires, throwing arrows, it doesn't do our children any good. It doesn't do our fire and our police any good. And I will say to Mr. Paul, you're saying that we're a country club and the town side is a third world country. Well, do something about it. You have $14 million. If our police are understaffed, if our police are underpaid, if our fire is understaffed and our fire is underpaid, the money certainly wasn't all going to us. So let's get together, let's have a conversation, let's get through, this where we can give each other the time to discuss. And do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, based upon the dynamic that I saw happening last night. That's my kid. So probably not, but you know what? I'm going to put it out there. I'm hopeful we can still collaborate. And at the end of the day, guys, the money, it's not council money, it's not school committee money, it's taxpayer money. Every dollar sitting in the bank belongs to you. So if you care about how it's spent, speak up. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Palish. So, all right. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sanchioni. Give us a brief overview of where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think, first of all, you're a tough act to follow. Excellent commentary. Someone made the comment the math hasn't changed, and you're absolutely right. So we continue to move meeting to meeting and still are facing what now is, if you use other funds and some of the cuts we've made into expenses, it's still a $3 million deficit, and it poses two really draconian choices that I don't want to delve into much today. I want to pose that, and you both all made this point, it's not option one or two. Those are the second and third options. Option one is how do we fund the schools? That should always be, and that should be on everyone's mind here. What is option one? Option one is to bring in the revenue to appropriately staff our schools, because we've demonstrated that when we're appropriately staffed, we can produce amazing results. So I'd like to just focus everything on that. However, with that being said, I think the school committee has to have a deep understanding of what the impact would be on one of these other choices. And so tonight, and I'd like to do this for the next several meetings, is bring up people who are going to be impacted by that and give you some information on that, so you can be well prepared for it. So tonight, I'm going to ask Sarah to speak a little bit about whatever choice it is, what the impact is on special education. I'm going to ask Principal Zatoli to speak about the impact at the middle school. And we're fortunate tonight to have the president of NEA, Kristen Deschamps, to speak a little bit about the impact on teachers, and also fortunate to have the past president of NEA, Amy Mullen, here to also speak about her work in working with the legislators and her commentary. So with that being said, I'd like to turn this over to Sarah, followed by Andy, and then Kristen and Amy.
Okay, thank you. Where is Sarah? Sarah's not in the room. Andy, I think you're up.
No, Sarah's here. She's next to me.
There you are. It's very confusing.
Sitting at the
being
same
up here.
table.
I'm usually singing when I'm on stage.
Okay.
Andy, stand down. No, Sarah's going. I'm kidding.
So I know Dr. Sanchioni showed many of you, if you have been in our meetings before or have seen online, the options for trying to close the budget. One of those options included removing a large number of staff, including staff members' roles as reading specialists, math specialists, social workers, and adjustment counselors or guidance counselors. So you saw names and numbers, and I just want to show everybody what that actually looks like in our schools. So you can read there that our efforts and resources are focused on supporting all of our students. We believe all of our students will learn and can succeed. And when we do this, we look at the areas of academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning. With that in mind, we have adopted a framework to implement those supports for students and services for students, all students, not only students who need additional supports. So this is the framework we have adopted. We have Tier 1 universal supports, Tier 2 targeted supports, and Tier 3 intensive supports. And you can see there it encompasses academic, behavioral, and social emotional. This is actually part of the Every Student Succeeds Act, that this will be in place in school districts. So I'm going to go into a little bit about what that means and what those staff members that are on the list and how they positively impact our students and families.
Which list, Sarah? Option 1?
Yeah, it's option 2, because option 1.
They're on both lists?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So in Tier 1, this is universal instruction, and you can see in the picture there, this is in the regular classroom So in our regular classrooms, we have our teachers instructing our students with high-quality, evidence-based instruction, and all of that, during that time, they are providing supports that are designed and differentiated for all of the students' needs. In addition to that, we have our SEL staff, either a social worker, adjustment counselor, or guidance counselor, conduct whole class lessons on a specific topic, and then they engage the students in that topic and they have a discussion or an activity. So the students have an opportunity to practice the skills that they learn from each other. So we have the academic piece, the social emotional piece, and we also have consultation from those reading or math specialists if there's a question or how to differentiate that in the regular classroom. If we look at that option of removing those specialists and social workers, Tier 1 will be only your classroom teachers. If we look at Tier 2, this is when, through the classroom teachers looking at data, they realize that just the differentiated supports in the classroom are not, the students are not making progress. So a team convenes and we look at implementing additional supports. So in Tier 2, our students receive more focused, targeted instruction or interventions and supplemental supports in addition to what's happening in Tier 1. So what this might look like for a child receiving these, it may look like a daily targeted instruction in phonological awareness outside of the classroom for 30 minutes in a group of 4 with a reading specialist. Or if the student is struggling in math, that student may receive targeted instruction in math computation, for example, outside the classroom for 20 minutes daily in a group of 4 students with a math interventionist. Or if a student or a group of students are struggling with social skills, our guidance counselors, social workers, or adjustment counselors conduct social skills groups, lunch bunch, or friendship groups. And here, they're really working on specific skill building, relationship building, and they have prompting from a clinical support person to help them problem solve with students. So, if we use option 2, our tier 2 will look like classroom teachers providing that tier 2 support. So now you have classroom teachers trying to implement tier 1 and trying to implement tier 2 throughout their instructional day. Tier 3 is the final tier in our framework of a multi-tiered system of supports. In this tier, students really receive more individualized interventions. These supports are included in daily instruction, again, either 1-to-1 or 1-to-2, and it is in either literacy, math, or if it's a social emotional piece, it can be done through individual school-based counseling. So currently, we have reading specialists that deliver tier 3. We have math specialists who deliver tier 3, social workers, adjustment counselors, guidance counselors, and then we also have consultation from our special education teachers to help support that. If we go with option 2, we have consultation from special educators to support our students. So that framework is really devastated if we lose these professionals who support this framework. So you ask how many students may be receiving these tiered level of supports. This is an approximation because students don't stay in a tier. Students move up and down in the tiers depending on how they're responding to the intervention. But you can see here that a large number of students in every building receive intervention from one of those specialists. And if you think back to those slides and we crossed out who won't be doing those interventions, it is left up to the classroom teacher to do that. So just one other consideration. When we look at criteria for special education, we have to determine students who have a specific learning disability. We look at how they respond to specific interventions, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and if they're making sufficient progress. So we use a lot of data. All of those interventionists and classroom teachers take a ton of data. We look at that and then determine whether or not we suspect a disability. The form we actually have to use that is provided by the state to ensure the systems of supports are in place and we are meeting our students' needs immediately and not waiting until there is a large gap, actually outlines we have to answer yes or no if the students do receive those supports. And in fact, when you get down to the bottom of that, it says when the group has documented yes to all of the answers, then you can proceed to determine a disability. We will have students who possibly have a specific learning disability that we don't have data for. Eventually, the numbers will increase for those students with disabilities, but guess what? We won't start working with them until they're in 5th or 6th grade. At that time, I'm sure they're going to be disengaged in learning, perhaps have some behavioral challenges in school as well. And then if you move that further into the high school, I do wonder if that would cause additional dropouts. So I wanted to paint that picture for you and what that looks like in our classrooms every day. That framework that we have set up, we have done systematically. We continue to work daily to improve it, but I'm sure my colleagues that are going to speak after me will tell you what that looks like in their schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Krieger. Yeah, sure. Ms. Palish?
I don't know, I'm still not, are these are positions on
Deb,
both?
you might
on
want
the
to,
one
Deb,
option two list?
microphone.
Oh.
These are positions on that option 1.
And some of them are on 2.
Not as many are on 2.
So, which is an important point to remember that actually, even with closing
okay.
Fort Barton, we do lose a certain number of positions.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
So they're on option 1, but if you look at the option 2, even if we close a school, they're on the bottom of option 2 as well.
Not as many.
Not as many, but quite a few of them are on the bottom there in order to get the 3 million.
Correct.
All right.
One thing I am going to point out, too, currently our high school and middle school have a full-time school psychologist and social worker. If the social workers or adjustment counselors at the elementary are not in our budget, the school psychologists and social workers from the high school and middle school will have to split their time between those elementary schools, and they will be mostly servicing the students with IEPs. So everything I just showed you is not students with IEPs. They're students with IEPs who have social emotional learning goals that have to be worked on per their IEP. So our school psych and social workers will really only be working with students with IEPs. That other percent I showed you in the slides are students without IEPs.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? Otherwise, Mr. Zottoli? Now you're up.
I knew I was going to do that. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, school committee. Dr. Sanchioni. I'm going to go into a little more specific of those cuts, and it's the same. Some of these people are on the first list, and a few of them are on the second list. So I'm going to try to bring into light the actual positions, and that would include cutting back on the school psychiatrist, our social worker, 2 math specialists, 2 reading specialists, a librarian. And I just want to talk a little bit about that impact. I think it's fairly safe to say if we think of our own public school setting, many of us, if we look back fondly, probably don't think of it as being like 7th or 8th grade being our favorite years. And there's a reason for that. It's a very difficult time for children to go through, going through puberty, trying to fit in, trying to make sense of a big world. Add to that the devastating and destructive impact of social media on their lives, school shootings that are more frequent than I like to even think about. That adds up to a very nervous, anxious group of children in this country that we've never seen before. Our SEL group teaches all 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students about the signs of suicide and what to do if they are worried about themselves or a friend. We screen all 7th graders. We know, and I knew this in Massachusetts, through the many Metro West survey in Metro West Mass, the surveys we've done in Rhode Island, 7th grade is a devastating year for kids for the reasons I mentioned. It's a high-risk time for kids. We screen all of them. If they have potential symptoms of depression, they get immediate help. Immediate help, whether it's through our people at work or Newport County. We waste no time getting kids the intervention they need and getting them back feeling healthy about themselves. Just to give you an idea, to give you the scope of that, when a child comes down and meets with one of our counselors or our school psychiatrist or our social worker, because they all play a role in this. They fill out a crisis report. A crisis report is not done if a child comes down to talk about scheduling or next year in the high school. It's only written when that trained professional feels that a child is in crisis and their safety is in question. In the 490 school days that I've been here, we filled out 300 crisis reports. And I will also say that the 4 women, and I say this because they're under Mrs. Krager's tutelage, so to speak, are the strongest educators in that field that I've ever met. So they're not overreacting. When kids need help, we get it. 300 crisis reports in 490 school days. To say we could live without them, I can't even imagine coming to school every day without their support. 2 years ago, my first year, frankly, the attendance was abysmal. I talked to Dr. Sanchioni, and I believe after listening to the last couple of things, we used ESSER money for a position. I asked him if we could take a therapeutic approach to school attendance. Because frankly, I could only go to people's houses so much. Police are already overworked, underpaid. I couldn't get them to school. And I don't mean 10 or 20 days, I'm talking 50, 60, 70 days that first year. So we took a therapeutic approach to that. We added a full-time teacher, a guidance counselor. Last year, in the first year, we were 25% better. Currently, our attendance is 44% better than it was 2 years ago. I'm not talking about hundreds of days difference, I'm talking thousands of days different because of the work of those people. Our math and reading interventionists, I'll just give you the numbers. 49% of our students are below level in reading. 44% of our middle school students are below level in math, and I don't say that in a condescending way or fault my colleagues here. It is what it is, and we kill ourselves to improve in those areas, and I think we've seen great improvement. Gives us nice small groups with highly trained teachers, takes the burden off our math and ELA teachers. They're already under enough pressure with RICAS and everything that goes with that. And then our librarian is doing many of the things, as you can imagine, a librarian does, but also she's also responsible for distribution and maintenance of Chromebooks, and I know Dan's here, that's a full-time job in itself, keeping them running and loaners and getting them back and making sure the chargers work. Yeah, we'd be hard-pressed to run our school without those people. That being said, when we are fully staffed, our crisis reports are on the way down, our attendance is skyrocketing, our suspensions are at an all-time low, and I mean an all-time low. We've also added numerous activities, and our student participation in after-school activities is at an all-time high. It's very simple. When students feel connected at that age, whether it's through our sports, our chess club, our unified sports, weightlifting, when they feel connected at middle school, they do well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zatoli. I believe we are now going to hear from Mrs. Mullen and Mayon. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Mrs. Mullen, Ms. Destramps. Thank you for coming.
Hi, good evening. I wanted to speak to you this evening as the president of NEA Tiverton, but also as a teacher at the middle school. Our schools are facing a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our ability to provide quality education to our students. It's a crisis of funding, of resources, and of priorities. As educators, we understand better than anyone the importance of investing in our children's future. Yet year after year, we find ourselves grappling with inadequate budgets, slashed funding, and resources stretched to their breaking point. It's a situation that cannot continue. Our students deserve better. They deserve schools that are equipped with the tools and resources they need to succeed. They deserve classrooms that are not overcrowded, where teachers can give each child the attention they deserve. They deserve counselors, math and reading specialists who can help them succeed to the best that they can be. But all too often, these essentials are treated as luxuries, sacrificed in the name of budget constraints. In addressing the deficit in our school department budget, we are faced with two potential options, each with its own set of implications and considerations. Option one involves many staff reductions with the positions of counselors, math specialists, and reading specialists. While this option will immediately alleviate part of the deficit, it could also have long-term consequences for the quality of education and morale within our schools. For the past 4 years, we have seen students experience setbacks in foundational skills such as numeracy and literacy. By cutting these services, our students will slip further behind and their social emotional needs will increase. These reductions will also result in the bumping of more senior teachers into classrooms with less senior teachers losing their positions. The bumping will reach all levels of the school department. Our schools will not look like the schools we have today. Option two entails the closing of Fort Barton. While the closing of a school is something we don't want to see, and it is a difficult situation, it enables us to maintain the programs our students need and deserve. As a former student of Fort Barton and a parent of 2 children who attended Fort Barton, it is difficult for me to think of the school closing. After many sleepless nights, worried about the effects of closing the school, I realized at the end of the day it is a building. The kids will still have the services they need to succeed and the teachers they love, and that is what is important. So as I end tonight, members of the committee, I don't envy you the decisions you must make. Any decisions won't be popular, but I implore you to do what is in the best interest of the children of Tiverton and the teachers they love. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Destrips. Mrs. Mullen.
Hello.
Nice to see you.
It's nice to be back here. As just Amy Mullen, Tiverton teacher. We can spend our time talking about why we're here, or we can come together and help the school committee determine which decision is in the best interest of our school department, and most importantly, our students. To me, they're our children. I have been to the State House multiple times to plead with our legislators to fix the state funding formula. I have been the voice from Tiverton advocating for the restoration of state aid. The National Education Association Rhode Island has been on the offensive, fighting for our students so that they can have the education they need to succeed. We're not spending our time putting one constituency group against another or one local union against another, because we know that together we are stronger. I understand the difficult decision that needs to be made, and I know how difficult closing a school can be. I hope those fighting to keep Fort Barton open understand that it will look different next year if it does stay open. It will not have many of the same teachers. The specialists and many others who will be cut will displace those teachers. They will be the teachers in the classrooms at Fort Barton, because many of the Fort Barton teachers are newer to the district and therefore are at the bottom of the seniority list. The reading and math specialists are generally the more senior teachers, and they will lose their current positions but will not lose a job. Those more senior teachers will bump into those less senior positions, and the less senior teachers will be given layoff notices. Some of that is likely to happen with either option. For my entire career, 30 years now, the elementary schools have competed for resources, training, innovations, attention. The teachers have consistently and always asked for more cohesion, more unity among the elementary schools. Putting the grades together in 3 buildings moves towards achieving that goal. It allows your teachers to learn with and from each other on a daily basis. Losing a high school guidance counselor, an elementary guidance counselor, an elementary adjustment counselor, the middle school and high school bridge programs will hurt many students throughout our entire school system. This will have an impact that lasts beyond the 2024-25 school year. Teachers are seeing more frequent and more significant social, emotional, and behavioral needs from more of our students in our classrooms. And what we want, what we need, is more support for our students, not less. We're still dealing with the impacts of COVID-19 and that learning loss. A new generation of students come into our classrooms tech savvy and sometimes academically unprepared. Eliminating high school, middle school, and elementary reading specialists will jeopardize our students' reading abilities and put them at significant risk for school failure. Cutting your math specialists will do the same. I've only been a math specialist for 3 years, but I went back and I looked at my caseloads. My first year, I provided services to 31 students at Fort Barton from September through the end of December. And then I was full-time at Ranger, providing math intervention services to 57 students. In my second year, I provided services to 48 students. This year, I'm currently at 51. I work with kindergarten through 4th grade students, and I have worked with preschool students. Now, suppose you're thinking about value for the students. In that case, I've supported 156 students in 3 years, only about 18 fewer than are currently enrolled in all of Fort Barton School, which is 5 years of grades. 3 math interventionists are being proposed to be eliminated at the elementary level. Suppose we each intervene and support an average of 50 students each year. In that case, the population of Fort Barton will be unsupported every year in math at the elementary level moving forward. Just to put it in perspective for you. And for our reading specialists, the proposal calls for cutting 5 of them. So it's much, much worse. I also can't imagine the strain that this will put on our classroom teachers, who are already dealing with plates that are so overloaded that they look like metaphorical classroom weight, cartoon diner weight people trying to balance already overburdened and all too heavy loads. You know, all of this could lead to parents having to pay for private tutoring or leaving for other districts that have those supports, making our financial problems much worse. It could also lead to our teachers leaving to work in a better district. The town council is not going to rescue us. The town council has to consider the needs of the entire town. The fire department, the police department, the public works department, all have significant needs. We need to accept our current financial reality, decide about next year, move forward, and then start working to figure out what needs to be done to bring our students back to our schools. We have great teachers who do amazing things together for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mullen. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions from the committee one more time, and then I'm going to open up the podium for comments from the public. Before we do that, if I can find, so Dr. Sanchioni, I had a couple questions for you that had been sent to me by a parent that I think would be helpful for everyone to hear. So one of the questions is about CTE programs, so career and technical training programs. Certain number of students go from Tiverton to other districts. Certain number of students come from other districts to Tiverton. Do you have a sense off the top of your head what the flux is there? I probably could have given you this question beforehand, but I didn't.
So I think you're asking me dollars in, dollars out, what's the delta?
Yeah.
Okay, about?
Since we're talking about money, I guess that's the question.
About 280,000?
No, it's like 700.
The delta?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, the delta of
How much we
kids
pay out?
coming in for CTE
How much
versus
do we
kids
pay out for
going out.
CTE?
We pay out like 750,000, we only pay
750,000 CTE, just CTE?
Well, it's to other districts.
Yeah, what's your CTE?
Exactly.
Amy, why don't you?
Yeah, Amy, the question maybe is better to you.
So we pay tuitions for students to attend other districts. In some instances, it's for career and technical education. In other instances, it's for other reasons. So the delta between the students coming to us for CTE and the students going to other districts for CTE is probably around $300,000, and not in our favor.
Okay, so we pay out about $300,000 to other districts.
Over and above what we receive, yes.
Okay. And then the other question is, we don't have any revenue from advertising of any sort that I'm aware of?
No, that's against your policy.
That's what I thought. Okay, just so the questions were asked, so I figured I would try and address them. Grants in general usually have a very specific purpose and can't be used for other purposes, specifically can't be used for operations in general.
Correct.
That is correct, right?
Correct.
And the amount of money we receive in grants is pretty variable year over year, but is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars range most years. Is that correct or incorrect?
So we receive grants from numerous sources. I say numerous, or varied sources. Our entitlement grants, which come from RIGL as sponsored by the federal government, is roughly about $1 million a year. Other grants from private sources are typically, can be as little as $10,000 a year, or can be as much as $100,000 in the year. It depends. We did get some extra funding recently because of COVID-19, but that has all ended and is not available for us to access going forward.
And when you say entitlement grants, can you tell me what you mean by that?
Title I, Title II, Title IV, IDEAB.
So it's basically students who fit a certain profile and/or need we get support for those students to provide them with services.
Correct, in general, yes.
Okay, that was my question. Mrs. Palish, questions?
No, I think we need to hear from the public. I agree with you, I want to do that, but before we move off the budget topic, I know I had a couple of just alternate solutions, if you will, from a couple of parents, and I think Mrs. Farnworth, you had one as well. So let's hear from the public, but before we move off the topic, if we could just, I don't know that we're going to have robust discussion, but I did promise that I would bring them up.
Okay, so after the public comment. Okay, all right. Anyone else? Mrs. Farnworth, Mr. Dakotas, Mrs. Pavo? I guess I'll just make one last comment then. I'm sorry if I'm putting everybody off, but I just want to make sure everybody understands. In 2018, we received about $6.5 million in state aid. Our state aid peaked at $7.4 million in 2021. We're projected for this next fiscal year of $5.7 million. So we're not dealing with a loss of just $1.2 million. It's actually much more than that. It's $1.7 million from our high point of 2021. And even when we go back, so I guess this is 8 years to fiscal year 2018, we're still much lower from $6.5 million to 5.7. So we're $800,000 less than we were even getting in 2018. This is you can't underestimate the impact that actually has on the deficit we're facing. We probably can't make up the loss that we're making even in the budget we're able to ask for legally of the 4%. So that has to really be kept in mind. So now I'm going to open up the floor to questions from members of the public. Please state your name. Oh,
Okay, wait a minute.
They took everybody out. Probably a good
You
one.
hear me? All right.
Yeah.
I'm Denise DeMedeiros, 55 Kevin Drive. Full disclosure, I'm the town council president. You keep mentioning the 14 million. I sat with the treasurer, well, I actually talked to the treasurer today. we're not quite sure where you're getting that from. We're not arguing it. I just would like to go over it with you.
Sure.
And I'm not sure, is it page 25 you were looking at?
I'd have to go back,
Because I'll tell you what I think it is, and
Okay.
would this be helpful? So on page 25, it's year-ended expenditures. And the bottom column is fund balance. Now, Dr. Sanchioni, is that what you were looking at when you were?
no, actually, it was the number I got off the audit from
Okay.
Sahadi and Hagan.
Okay, so I think this is where it's coming from. The general fund, the fund balance as of June 30th was 6.746196. That's the fund balance of the general fund.
I'm sorry, say it again?
6,746,196.
Okay.
6,746,196. Out of that fund balance, the town council voted years ago to keep 3%. That's for emergencies. Most towns keep from 7 to 10%. We've been trying to raise that a little bit because in a real emergency, if something was to go wrong financially, that would pay only 6 weeks of our financial obligations. So when you take that out, that leaves $3.1 million left there. Now, we took $1 million out of there last year to help balance the budget, which helped give the school committee the 3%. The landfill closure, which is $899,279, that's a restricted fund. That comes from the pay-as-you-throw. That is going to help us finish closing the landfill and build the recycle center. We cannot touch that money whatsoever. The gaming revenue, it looks like a huge amount if you look at it. It's $6 million. But in October, we allocated the school committee and the town council money. Not all of it has been pulled out of that yet, of course, because there's ongoing projects, loans we're paying. Out of that money right now, we have $3,193,000. That's a restricted fund also. That's per resolution of the town council. And like I've explained last night and several times, that is used for capital. And we've used it very wisely for capital. We have given the school department $3 million, and we've fixed things that need to be fixed, and we've addressed safety. And that was a big thing a couple of years ago. And the other funds that you see, the non-major governmental funds, those are the grants. Those are the grants that we received that that we're paying off cars and everything. So in reality, the town council actually has $2.8 million in the general fund after all is said and done, and 3.9 in the casino fund. And that's all we have. So I don't know where the 14 million, I wish somebody could explain where you saw that or where you got it from. I think it's this page because it's very, very deceiving. And it doesn't explain, this is really in our accounts, but it's all
Then I'm
restricted.
deceived. I won't claim to be an accountant.
Yeah, and me neither, I'm a nurse. So that's why I had to talk to the treasurer this afternoon. And we thought we figured it out because when you add this up, it comes to 14 something. But in reality, the town council has 2.8 that they can use from the general fund, unrestricted. That's the only money that we have right now. So the 14 million, if you want to send me a spreadsheet where you think it is, but I think this is where you're getting it from.
Yeah, and maybe we need to
The
look at
audit,
it.
just so anyone knows, is a public document. You can
Yep.
all request it from the treasurer.
Yeah, and I'm going to put this on the town website tomorrow, so people can actually see it with an explanation.
Okay.
Thank you for hearing me. Have a good night.
Great, thanks. Mr. Souza, come on up.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm John Souza, 30-year resident of Tiverton. Just by way of background, 20 years of financial management in the Navy, 20 years of business manager for school departments, and about 20 retired. And when I retired, I swore I would never do this. That is, attend another school committee meeting. I had enough of them. But
Not the only one.
yeah, but you have an option. I told you a long time ago. Jerry's my neighbor, so he's been advised. But what I want to do, if it's something you can use, is I've got a background that I'm willing to help the school department with anything they've got going on. Budgeting, I have to admit, I have never been in a budget situation where I had excess money. I have no idea where that money has come from in your budget, but we just never got it. In Massachusetts, if you had leftover money, it got turned over to the general fund every year. So God bless you if you have some of that. But I just want to say that I've sat here tonight, I've heard an awful lot of interesting comments, interesting information that I never heard as a business manager. I've been attacked by residents. Okay, one night, standing beside me with a microphone in his hand, smacked me in the back with it. Just, you know, it just goes with the trade, I guess. But at any rate, I seriously, if there's anything I can do for the school department, with the school department, especially on the business manager side or facilities side, I stay away from education. I am not an educator. My whole function is to support the educators. So if there's something I can do, Jerry, let me know, or superintendent, let me know, or any of you that I already know up there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Souza.
Hello, my name is Riley Kilmer. I'm a parent of a kindergartner at Ranger Elementary School, and I have two other kids that are going to be going through the Tiverton schools.
Can you talk, a little bit closer to the microphone?
Absolutely, yeah, sure. I was saying my name is Riley Kilmer. I'm a parent of a student at Ranger Elementary School, and I have two younger kids that we're going to be going through the Tiverton schools. And one of the reasons we recently moved here, partially because of the Tiverton schools, so that was definitely one of the reasons why we're here. So I just have three pretty direct questions. I guess my first question being, you're mentioning all of these two options. So my first question is, are you thinking about any alternatives to those two? So are you considering third options? Are you looking at potential other options, or are you just looking at these two specific options at present?
So it might be most helpful if you asked all three questions, and then I'll let the superintendent respond.
Yeah, so I mean, in keeping with that question, one of my points is, have you been looking at things like, you've discussed reductions in administrative raises, but things like cuts to administrative salaries, cuts to administrative positions. I see there may be some on there, but I don't see a lot of that, and that's where I think, as a parent, things should be cut first at the administrative level and not at the teaching position level. So things like that, things like tech cuts to technology, cuts to consulting, training, to the extent that that's in the budget. Not sure that is, but to the extent it is, have things like that been considered? That's my first question. My second question being the effect of elementary school children being put into a middle school setting. So if Fort Barton is closed and you're going to move children from elementary school into a middle school setting in the fourth grade level, have you thought about how that's going to affect children? That is generally not an appropriate environment for elementary school level children, so that's definitely a concern of mine. So I want to know if that's been thought through and what you've done to look into that. And then finally, in keeping with some of what other individuals have said here, I would just really implore you all, the school council, to work with the town council and not have this acrimony to try to work together to try to solve a problem and try to have open meetings. I'm not alleging that you all have not done that, but I'm asking you to do that and try to work and move forward on finding a solution rather than blaming one side or the other as to who's to blame for the problem. So those are my questions. The last one isn't a question, but it's really the first two.
Okay, thank you. And I can assure you that we stand ready and very willing to work with the town council to try and come up with a solution. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Sanchioni to address your other questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the question. So first one was other options, and I got to continue to reiterate, option one is to fund the schools. And I don't want people to lose that because it's an option I think we seriously have to consider. And you just have to look longitudinally at the cuts that have been made, for the last 7 to 10 years. Are there other options beyond that? I believe the school committee is going to recommend a few this evening, and so I'll listen to those. And certainly, we're all ears on any options that are out there. I mean, we've gone through every position, every expense account in the district, and reduced everywhere we possibly could to make up a $3 million deficit. Regarding administration, the administrators, we've cut administrative, so all of our contracts are in place for FY25. And typically, our administrators follow the contractual raises that our unions get. Next year, the administration is taken to zero. It's not a very significant amount of money because we have the smallest administrative team in the East Bay. We have cut administration positions in the past to get to that point where the leanest in the East Bay, and there is an administrative position on the cut list for this year. And then lastly, I think you asked about elementary school and fourth grade at the middle school. Again, this is not ideal. I'd like to focus my energy on option one. However, we've done due diligence on considering that, and it's simply looking at and running an elementary school, a fourth grade school within a middle school, so it's a later arrival, a later dismissal, classrooms located in a separate part of the building, designated bathrooms, designated time in the cab, designated recess time, and all those things. I feel like we've considered every possible way that those students would be educated by great fourth grade teachers in a setting that would feel like it's an elementary school. But again, it's not the option we prefer.
So you're saying you're preferring option one to option two? Is that
I
what you're
prefer
saying?
option one, which is to fund the Tiverton Public Schools.
Well, I'm talking about the two options you provided. I understand what your general position is.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your question if there was one.
So of the two options, you've presented two options other than essentially fund the schools. So
Well, I think we have a long way to go to get a final decision. Again, there are going to be options presented tonight that I'm not aware of.
Okay. And I think it was more a question for the school committee rather than you, as far as whether other options were being explored.
If I could answer, if you mind?
Sure. Go ahead, Mike.
So if we cut admin, you have a superintendent, you have a director of finance, you have director of special education, you have principals, assistant principals, you have tech people. We have a director of maintenance. We have positions. I think if you trim admin, you can lower the budget hundreds of thousands of dollars, certainly not millions. If you take assistant principals out of the middle school or the high school, you could just talk to the principals here. They'll tell you the principal and the assistant principal have different functions. And if I'm wrong, please nod or do it like this or stop. But the assistant principal is doing the dean duties, doing a lot of disciplinarian type events, while the principal is trying to run the school, work with the teachers. We need technology. If we get rid of more technology, and I'm not saying we couldn't get rid of some, but if we get rid of technology, we're going to go back to chalkboards. We're going to go back to encyclopedia. We have to do technology. This is how our kids learn. I understand because I have children in the system. I don't think financially cutting a lot of administrators will get us to that number. I'm not saying we can't look at doing that because everything's on the table. I think the four people that are with me agree that everything's on the table. There's nothing that's not on the table. I think when you're talking about many millions of dollars, unfortunately, bad things happen, like many jobs go, buildings close, and maybe some admin, maybe they do too, but it's never going to get us close to where we need to be. That's just my feeling. And since you asked school committee, I just want to give you some feedback on my end.
Understood. Thank you.
I appreciate the question. It's a good question.
Hi. So first of all, I want to commend the school committee for the work that you do for our town. I don't want anyone to sit here and think that as a town, we want to pit one committee against another. That is certainly not our objective. I think we're parents who simply chose this town for its resources, and we choose to stay in this town to keep it that way. So, first and foremost, I commend the work that you do. I know it's not easy, and I can speak for myself when I say the past 2 weeks have been pretty daunting, because we found out a lot that I don't think any of us would have understood prior to any of this taking place. So thank you for the work that you do. Mike, I think it was you who mentioned these two options are somewhat of the best of the worst. Was that you who kind of said that? Okay, so I'm just looking for some clarification as to how, as a committee, you've arrived there. So we've now had 2 weeks to sort of process these two worst options, if you will. I don't think anybody here likes either. I don't think anyone here likes the idea of letting these teachers go. And let's be honest, we heard some wonderful teachers speak about the tremendous loss that both options would really cause, most specifically option one. As a Fort Barton parent of 3, obviously I have ties to the school, but that's not why I'm here. It's not my emotional connection. It's the choice that our community made when we elected to have 5 schools serve our children. So I'm here to speak for all of those schools individually. Now, I know you, Mike, indicated that each year you get a line-by-line itemized budget from the school department. I did hear you say that. We obtained what we thought would be a line-by-line itemized budget from the school department. Unfortunately, it was not that. So can you speak to that, and if you have something different from what we have? Because we certainly, if it exists, we would love to see it, because I'm sure we could try to help.
Sure. So I appreciate it. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask the superintendent to follow up. Dr. Sanchioni, did you and I speak last week about an itemized line-by-line budget?
Did we speak last week?
Yes.
Yes.
And so I asked the superintendent to provide one. There is one that exists. There's 4 people up here that have one, hopefully at their house, in a binder, line by line. And I spoke to the superintendent again this morning, and I asked him if we were able to get the school committee, the town administrator, and anyone in the public that wants to look at it. And I'll let the superintendent speak from there. Please, Dr. Sanchioni.
So, as you know, Mike and everyone else, we created a budget book. It starts in October. It's a line-by-line budget. It's a 5-year look back at all of our accounts and that's available to anyone who's asked. But that budget, as you can imagine, goes through a myriad of adjustments. October, November, right on through. We find out in I think it was December that state aid was cut by that much, and now we got to redo that budget. And we continue to have to redo. So line items and comparisons, we can certainly give line items for this year, but predicting line items for next year has almost become an impossible task. So I know we provided you with that.
Can I ask why? Just some clarification for
For
us.
FY '25?
Yeah.
Because we don't
Why,
know.
that's become an
We don't know
impossible
where the
task.
cuts are coming from. You know, we don't know where the cuts are coming from. I mean, we can just predict and trim it all out.
Can you clarify that? I'm just not sure where, if you can.
So,
Yeah.
We're all new at this, so that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I get you. And by the way, I got involved because my son was supposed to go to non-quit.
I went to non-quit. I can appreciate that.
Non-quit was closed.
Yes, it was.
So we get a line-by-line budget, just as salaries, supplies, tech, whatever.
energy.
And we have that line-by-line budget at and you can compare it to last year's budget, but we don't know, are we gonna cut salaries? Are we gonna cut technology? Are we gonna cut supplies? So we have something that we start with, and at some point, it's gonna have to shift, but we do have a starting point, and that was handed out. But we don't know what it's gonna look like at the end of the day, because we haven't decided. Like, is it the salary line that's gonna be cut? Are we gonna cut tech? Are we gonna cut after-school stipends? Are we gonna cut? So you have where we started. We don't know where we're gonna end because we haven't decided. I don't know if that helps.
Can I also add one more, just to add some flavor to that? We also don't know what we'll have to work with at the end of the day. And really, the final budget will be predicated.
I can't even hear you.
I'm sorry. Oh, goodness, never had microphone problems until tonight. I just want to add just a little bit of flavor to that, too, to say that we aren't going to know exactly the bottom line number we have to work with until perhaps June.
Okay, so
And at that time, the final budget will be put in place line by line.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that what we've looked at
Is a proposal.
Right, so really has no validity.
It is a proposal, and I'm hoping I'm understanding the document that you've received. It is the proposal that the administration put together that provides for level service. And that's something we continue to work with. And it's obviously, 9% increase? I think we're all realistic.
9.5.
Yeah, we're all realistic, and we know that's not going to happen, right? But that is the proposal that was put on the table. That is the starting point from which we began these discussions.
Yes.
If I just add on to sort of what they were saying, what you might want to look at are our current budget to actuals. Never mind. I'm not sure what you're looking at, because I'm not sure what you received, but what you may want to look at is how the budget was closed for FY, I'm going to get the numbers right, so FY '23, and then what the budget to actuals are for FY '24. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, she's going to jump in.
Can I jump in really quick? So I think what Jordan's trying to explain is that...
Can you say your name and your address?
Hi,
I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's like I know you guys by now. I'm Corey Marchand, 24 Christina Drive. Thank you. So just wanted to jump in really quick. So when I do my budget, so I have a line-by-line budget, but then I also on subsequent pages have to itemize what is in that line. So for example, budget line 57311, technology software, $138,818. On another page, I have to list out everything that I'm spending within that budget line. So I think what Jordan's trying to ask is, do you have an itemized list to show that you need that money in that budget line and what it's being allocated for? I think that's the missing piece.
Yeah.
If I can add one thing to that, just as an example to Corey's statement, I think the other night at the forum, we heard Dr. Sanchioni mention that so around 35%, correct me if I'm wrong, around 35% is reserved for quote-unquote discretionary spending. Does that sound about right? Could you clarify?
I never used the word discretionary spending. 70% of, if you want to do estimates, 70% of our budget is personnel, 30% is expenses. Those major expense drivers are health insurance, special education, transportation, and energy. When you add that up, we're at 96 to 97% of our budget.
Okay, so, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, sorry. So I just wonder if that exists somewhere. Like, is there a subsequent page that shows what is in each budget line? Because some of these budget lines, as we discussed at the last meeting, have increased significantly. And what is that going to? What is that money going towards? Do we have estimates to support it? I have to have estimates. I have to have exactly what I'm spending that money on. So I think that's the accountability piece and the checks and balances that we're looking for.
So can we have, let's have
Yeah,
Amy,
Amy should.
who actually builds the budget, talk to that.
So we, back in October and November, we meet with the principals, we meet with the technology department facilities, and they have a worksheet that itemizes all of the items that they want under each account code, or object code, if you want to call it that. And so then, because we have so many line items for budgetary purposes, creating the budget book, we roll those up under the respective account codes. So we actually budget for state purposes to every UCOA chart string, which can add up to 6,000 lines. So I'm happy to provide you with 6,000 lines when we get there. But since the bottom line has not yet been determined, I can't allocate that.
Sure. I think I would ask that the school committee at least take a look at some of those budget lines that have increased significantly, because I think that in order to do our due diligence, I think we have to look at why. What is that money
Which
being
they
spent
have,
on?
or I provide them with the detail.
In September.
Okay, thank you.
And that's great to know that you started doing it in September, but,
October.
Okay. Did somebody say October?
Oh, yeah, October.
Okay. But now, Peter did say in the very first meeting on March 12th that this problem began escalating about 5 years ago, correct? So, I don't know. I mean, within my household alone, if I know I have a budget problem, and this isn't to propose that we've never had budget problems before in Tiverton, because clearly we have. I said last night, I graduated 20 years ago. We had budget problems back then. But why have we continually relied on one-time spending to bridge these gaps? And why just now has the situation become so dire? And why weren't we looking at options 5 years ago? Because this, let's be honest, this came up in 2021 too, right?
Yeah, so some of that, if I don't mind, let me try to answer those. 5 years ago, I wasn't on the school committee, but I was on the budget committee. The schools had a $4 million surplus that was built up. I'm sure you've heard this story. Dr. Larkin came in front of me. I sat on the budget committee with some of the members of the council last night, Mr. Edwards, Ms. Janik, Mr. Paul, Ms. Jocelyn, and they asked for $1, and they got $1 that year.
But now that's compounded. So just in the name of transparency, just so people understand.
What do you mean compounded?
So if they were to.
$1 is $1.
No.
Sorry, I didn't
That's
mean-
a little condescending.
It's not condescending. You said compounded.
No, so I'd like to clarify if you'd
Okay,
let me.
I was
So
speaking-
if they were to get the increase, it would be compounded against the previous years. If they were to get 2%, 4%, 3%, 1.5%, it compounds. So we know how that works, right? So now, the only reason, in the past 2 years, I think it was 3% and then 4%. The only reason why in previous years it was $1 was to indicate a match. And it's a little confusing, and I didn't even understand this until last week, I can admit. But it's a match, obviously, with the previous year's allocation. So we just have to be clear with that. So when we add up what was injected into the Tiverton School Department over the past 5 years, we have an approximate 25% increase in overall budget, just one number to the next number. You can correct me if you want. Now, the other thing that I'm seeing is a decline by about 15% in enrollment. So while we all know prices have gone up, we all know about inflation, I don't think this accounts for the drastic increase in spending. Of course, we want our schools to be funded adequately. That's not the issue here, and I'm not here to say that to neglect the funding, but we need to look deeper into what we've been given and utilize the resources that we've had. And we're not, based upon what we've received, we don't see that.
So are you saying we've been adequately funded over the last 5 years as the town? I'm asking you talked about compounding, getting $1. You said 25% increase. Now, I don't want to be condescending, but I sat on the budget committee. It's a boring job. You get a book, and every week the police department comes, the fire department comes, and they tell you why they need their money, and everyone does. Everyone needs an increase. So
how much, if you want to, we'll talk numbers. From 2018, in 2018, what did they get? Do you know offhand?
2018, we got $1.
No.
The town?
The total injection.
Okay, the injection means you get the same money as the year before.
And how much was that?
Plus $1.
How much was that?
I don't have it sitting in front of me.
Okay, so that's where I'm arriving at the 25%.
Okay.
So to your question, that's where that's coming from.
Okay, so we did $1 followed by a
plus
I don't know,
the amount.
what you're saying doesn't make sense. Let me try to explain it. As a
Okay, go
former
ahead.
member of the Budget Committee, and I'm not trying to be condescending, I want to make sure I'm being honest with you. I sat on the Budget Committee. My only job is to look at budgets. There are other people in this room that have been on the Budget Committee. When you get $32 million, the next year you get $32 million again, plus $1. So that's $32 million and $1.
Right, that's exactly what I'm referring to.
Okay.
So I'm asking for those numbers.
Okay, well, we can
Year over year.
we can give you the actual budget. I don't have that in front of me for the town. But what I'm trying to answer to you is, we got the same amount plus $1. The next year, the petitioner's budget called for no money again. Denise Nemadiris, who you obviously know, we got together, a bunch of us, we did a petitioner's budget, and we got over $600,000 for the schools. The next year was COVID. There was another $1 increase. And then the last few years, we've gotten 4%, 3% to where we are now. But like last year, when we got 3% from the council, the state aid decreased by almost 3%. So the moral of the story is, you're getting that money, you're right, you're getting that $32 million, $32 million, $32 million, but you're not getting any more than that. So when the costs are going like this, and your budget's going like this, you're going to create a deficit.
Well, there has been more than that over the past 2 years, but
More.
there has been, like you said, the 3%, the 4%.
But the
So
state aid is
it just-
decreasing, as you heard before. So even though we're getting money from the town, we're not saying we're not, these are all actual numbers.
Mhm.
The state aid is taking money out of our pocket. So if I give you $3, and then I take $3 from you, do you have any more money? You have the $50 in your pocket. I gave you 3, I asked for 3 back, you still have 50, and that's the way I look at it.
Okay. Sure.
So-
All right, thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Hello, Brendan Andrade, 111 Ash Ave.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. I saw it was off. I promised Peter and Amy I wouldn't, I'm not going to discuss actual figures because I'm still going through the budget. But just so you guys get a little background, I've been in Tiverton all my life. I actually used Miss Mullen when I went to a private school when I was younger. She was my tutor way back when, and then I attended Tiverton High School. So my only public education in Tiverton was high school. So I do appreciate what the teachers do. The only questions I have really address what was said this evening by the members of the school committee, which I appreciate all you do. It's not an easy job. So first is Mr. Dakotas. I don't mean to pick on you. It's just what you said tonight, of course. But reality of 2024, let me back up a step. I'm also an accountant. I work at a publicly traded company, so budget numbers come to me. So reality of 2024 If you were to run a business, would you be able to run a business with a 10% incremental increase every year?
Well, I could if the company would be willing to give me money to offset increases. Yes, it's possible.
Correct, but if they didn't have it?
It would be difficult to balance a budget. You're right.
So you also mentioned, giving staff raises, which I've actually done in my budget. And again, staff raises are 2.5%, not 10%. You know what I mean? So if you kind of go down the line, what I'm trying to get to is, basically, this goes a little bit to Mrs. Palish as well. But what I'm trying to get to is when you're building the budget and you're trying to allocate funds, how can you go down? We know we're at 39.1 and we got some cuts coming. Can we see a budget with those cuts? How do you know what the budget's going to be until you put it into a spreadsheet, a line item spreadsheet? Sure. And again, I agree with Amy, it's going to be high level. I agree. And that's what I mean. I'm not trying to get itemized line items, but it's definitely going to be high level. But until you get there, how's it high level? And I know, Peter, you mentioned $3 million deficit. However, let me see the 39.1 get down to $38.1 million, whatever. My other thing is, the reason I'm not discussing figures is because I want to give the school committee a chance to actually look into the budget. I think there's plenty of movement for cuts. I still think we're going to have a deficit. I'm not disagreeing that we're going to have a deficit. I just think, the problem is the reality of we got more development coming in town, and it sounds like everyone's pushing towards option 2, which is unfortunate. But what are we going to, have we considered the new students in town? I'll turn that into a question. Have you guys considered the new students coming to town?
So I'm not an accountant, but the cuts are what we're talking about. All those teachers or closing a school. Those are the cuts. That's what brings it down to, I'm not sure exactly what the number is, 36, I think, million. And still leaves a structural deficit, still leaves us with needing to use fund balance. Those are the cuts. Those aren't 30,000 feet, those are right on the ground.
Yeah.
And those are the cuts.
But would you agree we're here today because of the one-time funds?
So even to get back to some of the questions, and that is one of the things that people have raised, is using one-time funds to fund programs. Yes, the school committee made that decision each year to take money from, starting in 2000, I want to say it was 18, where our special education costs were going up rather dramatically. That's why we say we've been talking about this for 5 years. This was actually something that was presented to us, and we said we're seeing a problem coming along. And every year we have had this discussion with the budget committee. Every year we've had this discussion now with the town council. The issue has been that we have not been able to persuade them to give us the increases that we needed in order to keep track of, to keep pace with this, although we actually did kind of keep pace with it. And we were not able to cut the things that we, were really driving our increases: energy, special education, healthcare costs, and transportation. So we were stuck. So yes, every year, this school committee, or some formulation of it, made the decision to use those funds that were available to us, and that's mostly where the fund balance that we had went. Some of that went for capital. We built draft walls into the high school. The lights in the hallway came out of the fund balance, but about half the fund balance went as one-time funds. The decision to do that was because if we had not done that, then we would have been having this discussion then. We would have been reducing staff. Some things compounded that as well. In FY21, so the spring of 2020, and we can't emphasize this enough, in that year, we asked for 4%. We were voted 2% by the budget committee. we got 0. Why did we get 0? We got 0 because that was the year of COVID. The budget wasn't actually adopted until September, or maybe it was late August of 2020. The school actually had the capacity by charter to submit their own budget to the voters. I was on the school committee at that time, as were I think all of us. We chose not to do that in good faith, that we would at some point be made whole. We never have been, or the schools never have been. That 0%, you're an accountant, echoes down through the years into perpetuity. And then I think the thing that no one, and maybe even myself, has fully appreciated is the impact of the cuts in state aid. $1.7 million. That's about 5% of our budget. Maybe not quite 5%. There's nowhere to cut. If you feel that there is something, and to Jordan, I think your point, all of the budget documents are public documents. They're all things that you can say, I received them. I want this, and oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. I want budget to actuals. The superintendent's office can provide you for those, whatever level of detail you want. You can go to the Universal Chart of Accounts, which is a mind-numbingly detailed website on RIGL that tells you where we compare to other districts, sort of where money is going tied to different types of functions. It's all there. If there are cuts, like getting rid of all the administrators, which still won't close the deficit. We could get rid of all the administrators, even if that was legal, which it's not. But if it was legal and we got rid of all the administrators, you're not going to close the deficit doing that. So I applaud them for not taking raises this year, but you're not going to be able to close the deficit on the basis of that. But again, $1.7 million less money in 2020, FY25 than we even received in FY18. It's very difficult to overcome that. You can't overcome that with even a 4% increase. A $1.2 million increase, if the town gives us 4%, that's just making up for state aid. What is the state saying to you when it cuts aid? It's saying that you're underfunding the schools from the local revenue sources. That $1.2 million, about $200,000 of it was decrease in enrollment, but the great bulk of it was from rises in the property values, losses in special funding for education, partly because we brought kids back to the district, which was a good thing for the kids, but we kind of got dinged by it, and decreases in our rates of poverty. So now you can argue with the state about, no, the poverty the poverty rates didn't go down, median income didn't go up, and our property values have tanked. But you can't argue, you can argue with them about that, and if you are successful, please let me know, because I've got some other things I'd like to argue with them about that.
No, like I said,
unsuccessful.
I did receive everything I asked for from Amy and Peter, so I thank them.
Thanks.
Dr. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If I may, Dr. Larkin. So yes, you and I have been communicating, and I have your analysis and going back and forth, but some of the differences between, and I know who you work for, so the differences between running a business and running a school department, many of our costs, for example, transportation, are mandated by law. We don't have the elasticity to make more or less widgets, find a different supplier. We have gone out to bid. We've enlisted other bus companies, and we only ever get one response, as an example. In terms of salaries and other things, we have contracts with unions that were entered into in good faith every 3 years or so. We don't, we can go back and renegotiate with them if they are willing to do that. If not, we are contractually obligated to meet those. So a school district isn't quite as elastic as a public company. And so we do cut. We have scoured. I have spent every weekend for the last month and a half trying to find where else we can cut. If we compare the run rate of where we're running now in the current year versus what we think it's going to be next year, there's not a lot of wiggle room. And so I just wanted to highlight that it's a little bit different context, not that your suggestions aren't valid. And so it's not, I want to say there's context there that most people don't understand.
Yeah. And
Which I know you understand, but not many others.
And I will agree to disagree because I did the run rate per the FY23 actuals, and that's why I'm considering a cut. You know, so that's just something, again, I'm not going to talk figures. I just want something for you to look at.
Right, but in terms of the run rate, I'm not necessarily sure you know of all the things that are coming up. It's
Correct.
It's not
and
even
again,
month to month to month to
correct.
month.
And that was my figures are based on literally watching a bunch of YouTube school committee meetings dating back 4 years. So like I said in the email to you and Peter, there was a lot of charts, graphs, a lot of information, even though, again, it might not be public. If you watch the meetings, it was presented on a PowerPoint, a slide. So
Everything
again,
is public.
Yep, so I agree. I don't know much on the school side, but based on numbers and figures I've seen, you know, again, going back to the salary line item, as you mentioned with contractual obligations, is when you do look at that, you know, we're not really contractually obligated, excuse me, can't speak, to provide 2.5% across the board.
Yes,
you know,
we are.
Just
We
for
are.
NEA.
No, that's NEA and Council
But,
94.
so when I did do that, I did it for everyone because I think everyone deserves a 2.5% raise.
Yeah.
And then when you look at, you know, stipends and personal services other on the salary lines, again, I didn't make any changes. I got down to 3.5. And again, I don't want to,
Right, but
I don't wanna
if I
talk
could
figures,
provide an
but-
example, and we'll cut it at that, as an example, in addition, in the contract, there are educators, when they receive additional education credits.
Yep.
So they receive significant stipends for those additional education
Yep.
credits over and above the 2.5%.
Yep.
The steps and lanes, that is accounted for in our calculation, that's over and above the 2.5%.
Yeah, and when I'm saying this, again, this will be the last thing I say because I don't want to talk about figures, but when I do that, I'm literally no changes. I'm saying our salary line should be 3.5%, not 4.6, with no changes to salaries, no changes to step lanes, no changes to salaries other, a little increase to certified subs at 3%, not 13, if I can read my little handwriting, and so on. And again, I want to leave it up to the school committee to look at those things, and that's what I'm trying to say. I don't want to talk figures. I want the school committee to look at those things based on information that's out there. Again, I'm not in your executive sessions with contracts, but I do see what's on YouTube videos.
So,
go ahead.
Well, I mean, if there are substantial line items that you think we need to adjust, you know, I think the best thing to do would be to email them to us and we can take those up. This is probably not going to be the
again, that's
forum
why I
where
don't want
we're going to be able to take the
that.
notes and sort of say, oh, that line.
Yep.
Let's decrease that.
Yep. So, losing my track now, but last thing I'll say is, this is a little bit of the problem, though. We're talking about a $3 million deficit, right? That's been mentioned. However, 200,000 of that's not actual right now because of the contracts, so that's why I'm getting my segue now. So 200,000 of that is bringing teacher contracts down from 2.5% to 2% to get to your 3 million. You're looking at me like you're confused, so that's why I want to bring it up. Not you,
Yes,
but
that's
the
one
line.
of
There are, you know, again, everything is a proposal right now. So
Correct, but I'm saying we're discussing a $3 million deficit, but it's really 3.2.
Well, Brendan, to be absolutely correct, that we're really talking about a $4.5 million
Agreed.
deficit. We're asking the school committee to spend $1.3 million in one-time money again next year.
And then we'll
So
be
the
here
deficit-
again next year.
Well, yeah, thank
much.
you for making my point. What's next year? It's you know.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm trying to get to. We might be here next year with more developments. Then
Yeah,
what are
it's-
we going to do?
It's not just that it's been going on for 5 years.
I agree.
It's not
Again.
going anywhere
Yeah.
for the next 5 years.
And that's what I'm trying to get to.
Which is,
We keep giving, and you know, with all due respect to the schools, I told Peter this, when you're a superintendent, you want to ask for the stars. You want everything for the students. I wish we could give them 40 million, right? But The problem is when a town is only giving you 4% every year, I know it's been less, but if they're only giving you 4%, but for instance, for last year, we worked off a budget of 36.3%, and we only got 36.3 million, we only got 34.3 million. So again, 2 million last year, 4 million this year, it keeps going, you know what I mean? So next year is going to be 6 million?
The average number of, so if you look at the, and it's not precise, that's not the right word. So the average increase over the last 7-8 years is 1.75%.
Correct.
And even that is misleading, because if you have a large increase early on in that period, then that compounds much more powerfully than a large increase later on in that period. So, so I'll leave it at that. Those are the increases. It's rarely been 4%. There was one petitioner's budget, and it was a petitioner's budget that was a 5% increase. Most have been below that, and then, of course, there was the infamous 0. So, thank you.
And last thing I'll say is, Mr. Zatoli said it well, and I think he brings up the fear of most parents is, he talked about the crisis, which is tough to hear, the numbers he presented. But I feel like we should consider, and I'm sure you're doing that, but I'm going to mention it anyway, is if we were to move the 4th grade to the middle school, how bad is that crisis in attendance going to become?
Again,
I know it's not something we can address tonight, but I want to end my discussion with that.
None of these options is palatable to any of us.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not necessarily to Brendan, but boy, there's an election coming up in November, Brendan. I would love. We would love some numbers people, and always welcome. Not just numbers people, but numbers people always welcome. I did want to just speak to, Jerry made the point that we have been every year, where's that? So really, this all kind of started, we had a $2.5 million increase in special education in 18-19. And yes, we knew it, and to Dr. Larkin's point, we were trying to cover it. We made 35 position cuts over that period. 37, 38, almost 38. So we understood that. We were trying to cut, we were trying to close it. But to Dr. Larkin's point, we were making the decisions to use one-time funds, and here's why. I pulled something from January 19th, 2022, and these are the things that we were contemplating cutting instead of using one-time funds. Elementary guidance, elementary math specialist at our second elementary math specialist at a third elementary, reading specialists, guidance counselors, school psychologists, adjustment counselors, and yes, they're all on the chopping block now, but understand we were just coming off COVID. This district, our teachers, our students were reeling. So faced with the choice of cutting the support specialists that we so desperately needed, yes, we chose to use one-time funds and continued to try to work with whoever would work with us, work with whoever would listen to us and say, we need to close this, we need to close this. To Dr. Larkin's point, we took 0 because now we're going to work on this deficit next year, right? And it just never happened. And you know what? Councils change, school committees change, and to Brendan's point, maybe what the people are saying to us is, we do not want to fund the education that you're providing. And if that's what the community's saying, then, yep, we have a $4.5 million deficit that, we have to close. And I really, if that's what people are saying, and if that's what we need to do, we will do it. But if the community is saying, no, that's not what we want, that's not what we understood, then speak out. You know, we don't control the purse strings, but speak out. But that is where we are, and I will say that using one-time funds, this was not a 3-2 decision. This was a majority decision every single year of the board that was in place, because the choices we were facing were so devastating. We chose to keep those positions in place and try to figure out if we could close this deficit. This year, the train wrecked. We no longer, you know, we don't have any more, you know, we have a little bit of fund balance and that's it. The state aid getting cut was huge. We didn't anticipate that. So now, you know, here is where we are. And maybe, Brandon, the community is saying, we don't want to fund the kind of education that you're providing. So here, what we're left with is make the choice. And it's only the 5 of us that have to make this choice, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know which side you're on. The 5 of us are the only 5 that are going to have a vote, and we have to decide what to do. And it stinks.
And just real briefly, Ms. Palish, I'm morally certain that all of those votes were 5-0. And again, the $1.2 million cannot overestimate it or overemphasize it. Obviously, I probably am overemphasizing it. No other community in Rhode Island suffered a decrease like this. It's 17% of our state aid was cut. No other community. Next week, on April 1st, we have a joint meeting with the town council, and RIGL is coming to actually try and help explain this to us. So I would hope everyone would come to that as well, because that's, you know, that's you know, maybe not such a great metaphor today, but, you know, that's where the train went off the tracks. Was actually we continue to try and close this every year with one-time funds, but the $1.2 million is, you know, $1.2 million sort of already on top of a $500,000, so a $1.7 million loss in state aid is, you know, we can't close that. So anyway.
Hi, I'm Shannon McNamara. I'm losing my voice, I apologize. 65 East DeMello Drive. You know, I know a lot of you had much to say about the town council meeting last night, and I gotta say, I know that this is not an easy job. It's not an easy job for the town council. It's not an easy job to be on the school committee. No matter what you're doing, somebody is wrong. Most of the time, everybody is wrong. And I would not want to be up here listening to that for hours on end. So I really do commend you for being up here listening to that days, hours, weeks, months, and in many cases, years on end. So thank you. You know, I had a statement last night on what's going to happen to this town. And, you know, you can choose to listen to my statement on the YouTube video, or I can even email it to you. But with that said, I have a few different things I'd like to discuss tonight. My sentiment is, you know, both of these options are going to destroy this town. And that's my feeling. Option 1 may create a pediatric mental health crisis that will affect our children and their ability to learn effectively. It'll cut valuable teachers who have served our children and our community at every one of our schools. And it's while admins are remaining comfortably in their positions. And I get it, what you're saying, that, you know, it's lean there, but that statement needs to be made. You know, $852.54 a month goes to taxes. That's just for my house. And I have a good friend who lives 2 minutes away and pays $2,300 a month. So just something to think about. Option 2, moving on to that, it could possibly destroy this town financially and alter the very fabric of community schooling here. And that's what our town voted for years ago. And to flippantly declare that we just need to raise our taxes, it's really insulting to the people in this room who actually do the living and paying in this town. And I would love to see a show of hands of those sitting before us up on the stage who does live and pay taxes in this town.
Ms. McNamara, we all do. We are required to live in Tiverton to be a part of this committee. Well, let me ask you something. Does our town administrator live in this town? No, he does not. It is not a
I'm
rule.
asking-
It is not a rule for any employee.
I'm not
in
saying that
Tiverton to
it's a
live here.
rule. I'm not saying it's a rule, but I am saying,
So you're
that-
asking us if we pay taxes?
I'm asking everyone up there who lives and pays taxes in this town, because I think when you're asking for the taxes to be raised,
No one's asking for the taxes to be
No, we haven't at all. It's
Well,
not on.
there was a
And-
comment made,
and
that's
regardless,
all.
Just a point of order, we all have to be registered voters in the town. That by definition means we pay taxes.
I'm not, this isn't just
We all
at
pay
the school
taxes.
committee. I'm,
Well, there's people that
I'll
don't live in the
continue
town.
going.
Anyway, yeah, just move on.
you know, people and parents are seeing this for what it is. It's really this fight that's happening right now for kind of power and control in this town. You know, town council pitted against school committee pitted against town council, but ultimately, during this fight, our children are being the collateral damage. And it's causing them unnecessary fear and anxiety, and we as parents, we're seeing this at night because they are potentially losing their most basic sense of community where they've been going to school this year. And this isn't just Fort Barton students. I have a daughter, my kids go to Ranger, but my daughter might not go to Ranger next year, you know, under option 2. And that scares her because she has anxiety about that. She needs to know what's going on, where she's going. And I've been trying to be very calm about how I explain this to her. And, you know, that's hard as a parent. And, you know, ultimately, I don't care if you fail me because I'm an adult and I'm going to be able to figure something out. But I do care if you fail my children and the children of every parent in this room. And, you know, to the school committee, I just want to ask this. You know, who among you is willing right now in front of those who voted to put you here, say no? No, these options are not going to work. You know, no, I am part of this community and I won't let this destroy my town. No, you need to go back and you need to figure this out and you need to come back to this, you know, come back to us with a budget that works within the means of the pocketbooks of this town. I really just, that's all. That's all I have to say.
Shannon, may I say something, please?
Yes.
As a taxpayer, as a father of kids in this school, I feel your pain with your anxiety. I have a daughter in 4th grade that has anxiety, okay? The superintendent explained one really important point, and I think, was it 94% is fixed cost, Dr. Sanchioni? All right, so if 94% of the budget we just can't do anything about, that leaves 6%. So if you look at 6% of 100, and you cut all that 6%, it still doesn't get close to where we need to be. The collateral damage of underfunding, so I'm the child, I'm on the school committee, and the town council, formerly the budget committee, is the parent, they have the wallet. And if the child says, may I have $5 to go to the store, and the parent says you can't have it, then you don't get it. We don't make revenue, we don't generate revenue, we have to ask. So if we don't get what we asked for, like last year we asked for 4%, we got 3. But if we'd gotten 4, we could do a better job of closing up our gap. You see what I'm saying?
So
I want to answer your question the way you want it.
But I actually, you know, with what you said about the 94%, was it fiscally responsible for us to then bring all of special education to the town?
Yes, it was. Because when we had these discussions, one of the problems that we had was we're sharing a special ed district with Little Compton and with Middletown. And I will gladly let Mrs. Krager speak on this because she's an expert and I'm not. We had an opportunity to have better control of our special education in-house with our own teachers and keep our children here. So you're talking about anxiety. You're taking an anxious child with learning disabilities, putting them on a bus, and you're riding them all the way to Middletown. Talk about anxiety. You're doing it every day, and then you're sending that kid back here, and you're doing it 180 days a year. We had an opportunity to bring those children here where they don't have these longer commutes. We have our teachers we hired from that collaboration. We brought them in-house to keep them here. And at the same time, we did save a little bit of money when we brought them in here. And I won't ever regret that decision, but I can only speak for myself. We always look at the needs of the children. We don't always look at the budgetary options of those, but in this case, we saved a little money and we brought it in-house. And could I just ask Mrs. Krager to say, you okay
No,
with that?
I agree with.
It's a great question, but I want her to speak because she could say, Mike, you need to take a break. You don't know what you're talking about. So I just want to make sure. Are you down there, Mrs. Krager?
I just had thought, maybe I misheard, I thought it was stated that it had actually cost us a little bit more, so maybe I misheard, that's why I was asking.
Yes, I can speak to that. The dollar amount that we're spending on special education this year, on part of it, was spent on the assessment for the regional special education program. Instead of going to the assessment to the region, it's just back here in Tiverton. So there was not a, we did not lose money in that. Our students did not lose services in that. I kind of want to talk about the students too. They didn't lose services. And like Mr. Dakota said, the students are, those services are being delivered in their hometown instead of getting on a bus and going to Middletown or Little Compton.
That makes sense. I might have misheard that it was a little bit more, so that's why I just wanted to clarify that for myself too. All right, thank you.
Hello, I'm Denise Miller, 47 Tanglewood Drive. I just want to start by saying I know that the position you guys are in is not a good one, and I know, Mike, you have said that it pains you and you kept you up at night to have to possibly make a decision on what direction we're going to go. So I thank you and I commend you for trying to do the right thing. I just want to start off by saying I want to thank all the teachers and staff for all the hard work and dedication they put into educating our children, which can oftentimes be a thankless job. We appreciate the time and effort in you that you invest in our children and the future of our town. However, the school budget issues that we are currently facing should not come as a surprise to any school committee member, town council, or Tiverton resident. For certain members of the councils to say that they were unaware is quite alarming. It is well documented that the school budget has operated at a deficit for years, even prior to the current superintendent. What is not well documented is the accountability of the execution of the school budget allocated funds, which is mostly funded by taxpayer money. As a taxpayer, I want to ensure that our schools and educators have the tools and resources to educate our children and set them up for success. But there needs to be accountability and transparency on where those taxpayer dollars are going to ensure that the school committee, along with the budget committee, superintendent, the financial director, town council, are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. As a taxpayer looking from the outside, it is hard to pinpoint who is at fault. I feel like a child in the middle of a divorce. It's so frustrating, either the school committee or the town council. But what is very apparent is neither side is working together towards a solution that is in the best interest of the children in our community. Transparency and accountability should not be an option. As a reminder, per Rhode Island General Law 16-2-9, the school committee of each school district shall be responsible for maintaining a school budget that does not result in a debt. The school committee shall, within 30 days after the close of the first and second quarters of the state's fiscal year, adopt a budget as may be necessary to enable it to operate without incurring a debt. In the event that any obligation, incumbents, or expenditure by a superintendent of schools or a school committee is in excess of the amount budgeted, or that any revenue is less than amount budgeted, the school committee shall, within 5 days, working days, of its discovery of potential or actual over-expenditure or revenue deficiency, submit a written statement of the amount of and cause for the over-obligation or over-expenditure or revenue deficiency to the city or town council president or any person who by local charter or statute serves as the city or town's executive officer. The statement shall further include a statement of the school committee's plan for corrective actions necessary to meet the requirement of the section. The plan shall be approved by the auditor in general. I just wanted it as a reminder, and that's how I want to end my statement. But I know that you guys are trying to work that, but for both councils, we have to work together. It can't be this back and forth. It was so frustrating last night at the town council. I felt like I was being lied to by my elected officials, and then it's like, who's telling the truth? It's frustrating, and that's all I got to say.
Denise, can I ask you a question before you leave?
Sure.
Actually, Mike, can I just respond to Denise? Thanks for your comments. This committee remains completely committed to working with the town council. We would like to work with the town council.
And I just want to say that I've gone to parent advisory meetings. I've listened to the budget reports, and I know that you have consistently insisted that we're underfunded. You've gone to the town, you've requested, and I know I've seen the videos, you only get $1 or whatever. And that's where I think it's frustrating is you have the town saying, we don't control the school controls their budget, but at the end of the day, they have an obligation as a town official. If there is a suspicion of anything, you have the obligation to investigate that. And it's just frustrating to me that nobody wants to take accountability or responsibility. And I'm not blaming just you guys, it's all across. And as a taxpayer, that's frustrating. Where is my money going? That's what I want to know. If I have to pay the town my taxes, I want to make sure you are taking that money and allocating it where it's important. Because we all know when you have good funded schools, you have a successful town.
Yeah. So I'll agree with that. So a couple points, if I may. So we've never not met our obligation. And what I mean is, someone said it before, we've always closed our budget. So we've never gone, we can't do it, what do we do, and have to report. So we have. What we're trying to say is, sometimes it's not even the budget committee or the town council. When there were alternate budgets put in by a political action committee, when they put the budget to the voters, the majority of the voters voted to give less money to the school department. That's not the town council's fault. That's not the budget committee's fault. So on that one, that's what, and Ms. Pallas said this, that's what the town said. We don't want to fund the budgetary requests for the schools. So they voted that budget, and this happened 2 or 3 different years. This happened. So there's a lot of finger pointing. I said 2 times at the meetings, I take full responsibility for voting to use those ESSER funds to push along what we talked about. Because of COVID, my children don't have learning loss. I am lucky. My kids don't have IEPs. But lots of kids do. You saw a number tonight, 50, 60, 70%. When we look at that, we almost think, and Dr. Larkin's a physician, do no harm. We don't want to strip those children. If we did those, so I'm just going to say this, in 2021, coming right out of the pandemic, we all have the masks on. The kids can't see the smiles. We went through this whole thing, the anti-mask, right? Hey, listen, I didn't want to wear a mask either. I said it then, I'll say it now. However, we're looking at data. We're getting doctors to tell us. So we have to make decisions. I'm a basketball referee. I call a foul. It's against your team. You're mad at me. Over here, Ben is happy. He got the right call. A minute later, I reverse it. Now he's mad at me and you're happy. So sometimes we make decisions that we know aren't popular, but we think are right. So I'll take full blame for anyone that wants to say, you helped create a structural deficit. I proudly voted to use ESSER funds. ESSER funds were labeled for learning loss. And when we looked at kids coming out of COVID, there was nothing in the history of the world since the Black Plague that did what that did. So we had to make a decision. And I think I stand here today thinking our test scores are going up, our attendance is going up, our graduation rate is going up. How can that money be not well spent? That's my piece. And I respect you tremendously.
Thank you. I just want to say too, and I remember sitting in those meetings and looking at, we can, with the ESSER money, and I remember saying to myself, I understand why they are using that money to fund those positions. Because at the end of the day, I have 2 kids, a son at Ranger and a daughter at the middle school, and both of them are on IEPs. Reading, right? So when they were looking at either cut a reading specialist or we're going to take that money, I knew that then, that at that point in time, that was the right decision. But in the back of my mind, I knew this is going to catch up eventually. But I think that's what's so frustrating is just we knew over and over, and I'm not saying in general, anyways, we knew over and over that we were eventually going to be here and it was going to be worse. And the state aid cut was just what, that kind of made it worse. So at the end of the day, I understand where you were coming from. It's just frustrating to be in the middle of it and not get the actual facts. And I just hope that before any decisions are made on any option or any budget, that the town and the school committee can come together and present what they come out of their meeting to the citizens.
And I think if you watched the meeting last night, or if you looked at the meeting when they came to our meeting a couple weeks ago, we're very calm. We listen. We're not perfect. We might be a little prickly sometimes, but we certainly don't degrade the other constituents. They're volunteers like us. We'll say it over and over again. We're willing to work. We want to make a deal. We want to give your kids the best education. But we're not going to sling mud. We're going to act professionally. We're going to ask nicely. And we hope, like you're asking, that we get what we need to fund. Do we have some cuts we need to make and will make? We will. That will happen. Rest assured. Thank you, Denise.
Hello, Antonio DeMello, 69 Ford Farm Road. First, I'd like to say this is difficult decisions for everyone involved here. I have 3 daughters who graduated from Tiverton who did very well. I think as most of the taxpayers here, part of with asking for the budget proposal, even if it's just the numbers to begin with, it's transparency. That starts the discussion for the community. Another point I have, just shared cuts, administration and teachers. Also looking at what new programs were added in the last 4 to 5 years and possibly new positions. With the Fort Barton closure, and I'm not aware of where we are with that, what would be the bond issues?
What was the last question? What would be the...
If the town, if the committee goes with the Fort Barton closure, what are the bond issues involved?
Were you here at the beginning of the meeting?
I missed the beginning.
Okay, so if you were here, and I think everyone at least give us this credit, we did bring someone from Ride On, and they talked about the bond closures. If the closure affected the bond. Dr. Sanchioni, do you want to chime in on that, just since, what was your name again?
Antonio DeMello.
Nice to meet you again. So we could give this gentleman that information that he missed?
So currently, there's $2.5 million owed on Fort Barton. If that bond was paid off, you'd save about $400,000 in interest and automatically receive a $900,000 payment in housing aid from the state. And the person who spoke actually then had all of the bonds together, and I don't have the exact amounts written down, but if you paid off all the bonds, I think it was like $5.9 million, and you'd save almost $1 million in interest, and you'd get $1.8 million back in housing aid. So
Correct.
there's a bunch of options there.
Okay, and did they explain how the bonds would be paid off, where that money would come from? And again, I apologize.
No, it would be a one-time. It would be a one-time payment. So the town would have to pay it all in one lump sum.
Okay. Thank you.
To save the interest and then be eligible for the reimbursement. Thank you.
Corey Marchand, 24 Christina Drive. So I just have a few things that I wanted to bring up. So the first, I wanted to go back to Sarah's presentation earlier, where we looked at like that tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and how we're supporting students through those tiers. To a certain extent, the money that's allocated from the state in the entitlement grants, that money is sacred in the sense that it is allotted to the students who are receiving academic services or who are furthest from academic proficiency. So I guess my question is, even if there are positions, so reading specialist, math specialist positions that are they're laid off, or we say that we're cutting them, realistically, we would be able to bring them back when we see how much money we're receiving back from the state. So for example, Title 1A, That grant is allotted to teachers, materials, and support services, and last year we got $300,000. So that, to me, is 5 specialists. So is that the case where we would be able to bring them back using those funds?
Do you want me to? So we actually pay currently almost 2 full positions out of Title I. So that's obviously salary, benefits. We also use those funds for supplies and things like that, and we budget and spend almost every penny every year. So in terms of that, those are alternatives that we're looking at in order to move some of the operational positions onto those grants. That's been in discussions for quite some time.
Okay, thank you. And to be clear, the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, so that is not just federally, but state mandated. So we can't just get rid of those services. So they would need to be provided in some fashion, whether that's through the regular education teacher or through specialists that would naturally have to be brought back in because we are mandated to provide those services.
Like I showed in the presentation I did, it would be the classroom teachers who would be doing that.
And just so everyone's aware, classroom teachers can document their Tier 2 interventions and student progress, which could then be used to determine whether or not a student is eligible for an IEP. So no one would be refused an IEP as long as they were still receiving supports.
Correct. With fidelity and integrity, right? So
Absolutely.
in a classroom of 22 kids, we would just have to make sure that's happening.
Great, thank you. I also want to bring up the idea of 4th grade running separate from a middle school. So while I understand where you're coming from with that concept of still trying to run it like an elementary school, I think it sounds appealing on the surface, but in reality, those teachers are going to end up feeling extremely isolated from the rest of the staff in the building. So people go into the teaching profession because they want to be part of a school and they want to be part of a community, and when you are suddenly becoming just part of one grade level and you're no longer part of that larger school community, that is a very different feel. It's also going to be a very different feel for our kids. So if our kids are entering a school where they are arriving at a different time and leaving school at a different time, they're not seeing any other kids in the building, that also is going to feel really isolating for our students. So while I understand the rationale behind it to keep our 4th graders separate from the kids in 5th through 8th grade, I think in the long run, it's going to also create harm because you're isolating an entire grade level and those teachers aren't going to feel the same level of commitment or connectiveness to the school community.
Can I make a comment on that? I'm going to take a swing. I might miss, but I might get a hit. I believe that the 5th grade sort of has that now. So I believe, if I'm correct, the 5th grader in their own, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't want to interrupt you.
sorry.
I have a 5th grader, so
Okay,
I could
so I
speak to
think
it a
the
little
5th
bit.
grade are, although they don't have staggered bus times, right? And I'm going to look at Mr. Zatoli because he's sitting behind you, but I think they're pretty quarantined, these kids, from the rest of the school, for the most part. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong.
How often do they interact
To the
with?
mic, Andy.
Andy, can you come up? Do you mind? I mean, it's a great concern. I believe.
Yes, they are to a certain degree, Mike, different lunches. They have their own wing on that side, as do all the grades. They're downstairs, close to the office. Frankly, and I know this isn't my time to speak, but I don't think anyone's advocating that 4th grade is ideal. I think our plan, we've talked about it at great length as a group. I do feel in my heart of hearts that we can make it work for 4th grade. We can make them feel wanted. The same way we snuggle 5th graders up will be the same thing that we're going to do with your children. I can promise you that.
Thank you. And I adore the administrative team. I actually think that they would do a wonderful job. I'm not concerned about them and the fact that they could make anything work, because I think not only do we have great teachers, but I think we have some really fabulous administrators. So could they make it work? Yes. Should they make it work? I don't think they should. In terms of my 3rd grader going into 4th grade next year and going into the middle school, so I think right from the start when I say, okay, you're going to go to middle school, but you're not going to ride the bus with your brothers. You're not going to go in at the same time. Your day starts and ends at different times. I've lost him. Like, I've lost him right from the start. So I just think, while I don't like the idea at all, I just think that the staggered times and putting them on a completely different schedule would even make it worse. I think another point I just wanted to share was that I feel like I am fairly immersed in the town. So I've got 3 kids, lots of kids in and out of my house. I coach 3 different soccer teams. I'm an involved parent, and I have heard consistently a lot of parents of the 3rd graders in particular who are looking at other options in other school districts. They're looking at private school, they're looking at homeschooling. I've heard about calls to Wilbur. And so I just want to caution you and share that in reality, like, our out-of-placement numbers may go up and our costs may increase because we do have a lot of people who have a lot of concerns about the plan of moving 4th graders to middle school. And I do think, like, even a survey could be helpful in determining what is the actual number of kids that would be going into that building, because I'm concerned you're going to lose students. I think the final thing I'd like to say is I keep hearing, in particular, Dr. Sanchioni, I've heard you say, like, we're open to ideas, we're open to suggestions, but I haven't seen that, and I think my concern is that for 2 weeks, I've heard this group of people offer suggestions. So, you know, whether they've talked about tutoring, maybe we don't need the tutoring program, maybe we look at the online programs, we have to look at combining bus routes. I know the bus in my neighborhood stops at 3 spots in one neighborhood. There's no reason for that. Can we do something different? And yet the budget that was submitted to the town council yesterday seems to be exactly the same as the budget that was shared with us 2 weeks ago. And I want to see us try. I want to see us try to make that change and not just say, oh, if you have an idea, tell us. Because I don't think that idea is going anywhere right now. And I'd really like, thank you. And I agree, we're going to have a deficit no matter what, but I'd like to get that number down.
And so this is, I will say this. My opinion is this is the fact-finding time. So if you tell us something today, I don't think next week we're going to come back to you and say, look at all we cut. It's our job to take it, and by law, we have the right to go into executive and talk about this stuff because it's sensitive. We're talking about people losing jobs and things. And I think we're taking all this. I give Dr. Sanchioni credit for doing the whatever it was last week. It wasn't a school committee meeting, but it was sort of like a feedback session, and we'll have more. That's why we're going to have RIGL come next week, and you're going to see the council and the school committee together. Oh my God, we're going to be together, but we're going to keep having people say things because maybe a survey to find out how many kids we lose is a great idea. So you made my brain, you know, I don't want to say your thoughts aren't valid. They're valid. Are some of the thoughts not doable? Maybe. Are some of them maybe part of our future collaboration? Yes. Because what's going to happen is we're going to meet and we're going to take those ideas, and that's what's going to get us to a number that maybe we can do something with. So don't feel like your ideas are not being heard by us. We just can't implement them like next week. This is a process that we take them and we're going to work with them. And that's from a former budget committee member. Every week when we took the schools, the police, the fire, we're writing notes, we're jotting it. Then when we get together, it's like a negotiation.
And can I just say, understand that we are taking all your feedback into consideration, but we are also taking the feedback of our staff and our teachers. And we heard from Amy, we heard from Kristen tonight, and we need to listen to those individuals inside. We heard from Andy and Sarah. We're trying to listen to everyone, and we need to listen to them too. They are in the buildings. They understand what's going to happen much, much better than I do. And we are trying to listen to you, but we need to listen to them too. So.
And that's completely understandable. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lori Reese Brooks. I'm on 301 Boogamash Road. I'm going to try to make this quick. Since I've been back to this town, my daughter's been in school from 5th and 6th grade. I have felt a complete divide moving back into Tiverton that I grew up in. I don't know where I am. I don't know where I belong. I've gone to the parent advisory meetings last year. I attend school committees, the safety committee, and I feel that there's team Peter, non-Peter, team school committee, team none. And I want to address to the fact of what Denise said about the town council meeting last night, the meeting today. There's a complete divide. So I don't think any solutions are going to be resolved until we actually try to come together. Like I said, I don't even know where to be. It's clicks. You go to this meeting, they're talking about them online. Now we're going to go home, we're going to go on social media, they're going to be da-da-da-da. I'm sick of the mouths on social media that don't show up here either. You all have a difficult job, and I would like to request, I know next week we're going to be with RIDE, but I would like to request a meeting with the town council, with the school committee, with a moderator in a few weeks, bringing together all the options that parents have spoke about, the things that we've discussed. You've talked about 14 million. Denise comes up here, says there's none. It's crazy. So I would like to see that happen, because you keep hear about the community not wanting to give to education either. So we have now this whole technology and social media aspect that is causing a divide. If people want to come to this meeting and speak up, they can use their voice. And we need to stop this. We're trying to teach our children not to do this. Look, what kind of example is this going on? It's awful. So that's what I would like to request. And then I am also wondering, and I did propose this question in our groups, and a lot of people were like, you're going down a rabbit hole, you don't want to hear this, but I'm curious. When I went on to the elementary schools, they have all the events up in Tiverton. So there's someone teaching a Zumba class, a Pilates class 3 times a week at this gym in Ranger, at the middle school. We got the farmers market coming in. We got the Daisy Troop coming in from Little Compton, Westport. Do these businesses pay rent?
Yeah, for the most part, no. That when it's a non-for-profit,
Yeah.
we
A Zumba Pilates instructor is a non-pro. I think this is part of a solution. I'm not talking about basketball and youth, but people coming in and teaching a class. And I mean, how many vendors are coming in Tiverton? I buy, sell, trade now. I lost my job for 23 years as a massage therapist because of COVID. I took my daughter out because of masking. I think a lot of kids have been lost due to COVID that nobody's thinking about either. Want to put the blame on schools. But I think rent would go a long way when we're in this position.
So historically, we've let every community group that wanted to use the schools because.
Yeah, because the town
it was-
owns the
yeah,
schools.
it's-
You
it's-
own the schools.
it's
Well, that's
community.
where this public
So,
forum I'm
but-
speaking about,
Right.
this is where,
So-
if people want to show up and talk, like, we need this.
And we were in the midst of, or are in the midst of revising policy, because sometimes it's community groups, but they're groups from outside the town. If it's a for-profit, it's certainly a thing to look at. I don't think we would ultimately generate an awful lot of revenue that way.
Well, I was a founder of a nonprofit for 10 years, and I had to pay rent when I did a fundraiser. I had to pay for the items that we needed for the fundraiser. So when we're in a deficit this big.
We do have, if someone uses the building and a custodian is not going to be there and they have to bring in a custodian, we do charge for that. We don't.
That was my other
But
question.
But to your point.
I know you don't think it's a lot, but it does add up, and we need to look at ways of bringing money in. I believe it was Corey who also spoke about sponsors, fundraisers that are just being allocated specifically for our amazing teachers. After listening to Mr. Zatoli, those other teachers, that's who I'm listening to. I'm not listening to all of our emotions, and it's scary.
Yeah, and I've said it already a couple times tonight, but it bears repeating. We stand ready to work completely with the town council. I would love to have a meeting with them.
Well, I'm going to email them
And you won't catch me on social media, so.
Yeah, it's.
And that's such a good point. And I want to say, there are a few voices on the council that are loud and that are bombastic, but not all the voices on the town council. I don't want to throw them
Right.
all under the bus. So I don't think it's beyond the pale to think that we can't have a meeting. Are there some difficult personalities? Sure. But you know what? We all
Always.
work with difficult personalities
Yeah.
every single day. We just put that aside and you say, okay, work together because that's what the community has asked for. But I just want to make sure that we are not saying that everybody on that board, there are some real strong community members on that board. They're all volunteers, but there are a few voices that, just a couple.
Yeah.
But it's a 7-member board.
I think and I just think our community needs to heal before anything more happens.
And again, we never aspire to either of these choices, or either of these options of cutting a lot of services or closing a school. Last thing in our mind, we certainly got hit by the state aid cut, and these are really bad choices and difficult decisions, and emotions tend to run high, whether it be among the parents or among the teachers or among the town council or among us. But again, we stand ready to try and find a solution.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Courtney Wolf. I live at 75 Picasset Ave. I just have a question for logistics. If you have a high school start time, you have a middle school start time, you're saying there's going to be a separate 4th grade start time. Is there going to be a 2nd, 3rd start time and a K-1? Because they're all at different locations. So for parents, logistically, we'd have to drive our kids to multiple schools. Like next year, my son would be at Ranger because he'd be in 1st grade, and my daughter would be in 3rd grade at Picasset. How could I feasibly drop them all off if they're still running at the same elementary time? Are we going to have 5 separate drop-offs and pickup times? Because wouldn't that affect the bus cost as well?
Peter, you want to take that one?
I'd say we're trying to make this work if this gets there, and I guess I want to keep saying back, I'd rather not do this. I'd rather have, the right funding to keep the schools functioning at the level we are right now. So we're working out logistics with our bus company to figure that out. We certainly have heard from parents that the difficulty it would be if start times were the same, so we want to take that into consideration.
Okay, I was just trying to figure out, there's so many different things, and we're talking about 4th grade having its own time too. That's 5 separate drop-off times. It's going to make the days really long because you have to stagger 5 times.
Yeah, Courtney, 2 years, I just want to make sure I'm getting this right. You're saying, as a parent, driving your kids to the schools, okay?
Yeah, I drop off and pick up my kids every day. Someone, whether it's me, my husband, my mom,
Okay.
we drop and pick up the kids up every day.
Okay.
So in order to do that, they'd have to be staggered, or you'd have to stagger buses in order to be able to drop them off and not have a kid be late every day.
Would you be willing to put any of them on the bus?
I shouldn't be forced to put my kids on the bus.
I didn't ask you to force.
That's my thing, though. I should be able to drop them off.
I understand. That's why I said, would you be willing to put I didn't say have to.
I don't think I should have to, though. I shouldn't. Would I be willing to? Yeah, maybe. But should I have to? No. I should be able to drop them both off at school and then be there on time. Just like I should be able to pick them up on time and not have to have them take a bus. I shouldn't be forced to.
And you understand I asked you a question, right?
Would I be willing?
The question is willing. What I'm trying, this is
Willing, yes.
This is what I'm asking, and we know each other.
Yes.
I'm trying to see how many parents don't want to ride buses, because we pay a lot of money for the buses. If we could eliminate some of the bus routes, and we would save money. So if we had an option with multiple parents driving kids and we could use less buses.
We have to have a seat for every child.
It's a law, Mike.
Well, you need to have it.
Figure this out.
You need to have it. I understand that because you have to allow us to be able to use the bus. But you
Great
don't have
point.
you can't force us to use the bus, and I shouldn't have to maneuver. I drop off one kid, my husband drops off one kid, and we have to maneuver our work schedules for us both to be able to drop off and pick up for the kids to be there on time.
Of course
So
not.
you're
And
asking for 5 separate
And your
times.
points are very valid, and we will absolutely take
We're
that
trying
into
to
consideration.
understand this. That's why We're not saying, why don't you? That wasn't
Yeah,
the
no.
question. Would you be willing? And if you say no and people are screaming no, then there's an issue with putting kids on buses. And I need to know more about that because, to be honest with you, my daughter used to ride the bus. Now she gets a ride. And it's obviously parent choice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, Mike, I want to give everybody a chance to speak, and I think actually this lady was next.
Thank you.
If you guys,
Oh, you had a bus thing. Sorry, she just had a bus comment as well.
I just wanted to add something on.
Yeah, I just wanted to know like how that was going to
But
work
there
out
was
because I
somebody else
shouldn't
in-
have to use the bus.
okay. There's actually somebody else in line before you.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
The only thing
You're
I
up.
wanted to add about the bus is, I'm a Ranger parent. I live on Fairwood Drive. It takes my kids currently already 45 minutes to get home. And it's a 5-minute drive for me to just drive them there. My kids also attend things after school. So already I'm trying to get my kids from school to their extracurricular activities. And my concern too with the buses is I'm also an employee of Tiverton Schools. Next year, it's looking like for me that I'll be at Ranger because I'm in the pre-K program. My daughter will be at Pecasset, she'll be in 2nd grade, and my son will be in 4th grade at the middle school. So it's not so much of getting them there, it's getting them home so they can do their extracurricular activities. How am I supposed to be there at 3 different places all at once? That's my only concern. Because like I said, already with them being 5 minutes from home, it's taking them 45 minutes to get home. So what's that going to look like next year? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Suzette Aguirre, and I live at 15 Prospect Hill. I'd like to share a little bit. I shared my story with my oldest child who has graduated from the Tiverton system. She is now 24 years old, and I currently have a 9-year-old enrolled at Barton. She's 9 years old, and next year she'll be 9 when she goes into the 4th grade. As a parent, I was in a business meeting, and shortly right after the business meeting, I got a text from somebody on the PTO. I'm currently in the PTO. I try to be very involved. And shame on me for not realizing how bad this situation was. So I do take responsibility for that. When I got out of the meeting and they said, Barton is closing, I said, oh my God. I had no awareness of this. This town council had no awareness of what was going to happen. We came to the meeting last week. I listened to the meeting yesterday. As a parent, this is what I heard. So please understand our frustration. Last week, the superintendent announced the 2 very bad choices that affect our children developmentally. I'm not concerned about, because as with my oldest, I drove her here and got up at 4:30 in the morning from Lincoln so that when we started school in Tiverton in the fall, she would have a community, she would have friends. So I drove from Lincoln to be here for 6:30 in the morning so she could practice field hockey. I don't care about the sacrifices that I have to make, the inconveniences or the driving around, and I know that that is a concern for other parents. My concern is for my child's development. She currently doesn't have any special needs, but after speaking last week, there was a social worker here, and she used crass language that is being used in the middle schools, things that the middle schoolers are doing. And what you're asking of us is to say, take our sweet, nice 9-year-olds and placing them at the middle school where they're not quite developed enough to be in that environment. I get you're going to seclude them, but how much will they be witness to with as much as they're going to put in place? We went to the meeting. Superintendent announced what he had to say. the town council was not aware. Town council yesterday did voice their opinion. As a parent, I could hear their frustration. I could hear your frustration. As a parent, we trust the town council. We trust you. I don't see, and you mentioned that if they're willing, you'd like to work out a solution. In all of the meetings that I've either watched on or have been here in person, everybody says, we've known this for 7 to 5 years. 7 to 5 years. And yet, there has been no communication, no resolution, no solutions, no talk between the two on how this would not be an issue for our children. And I get it, there's been some cuts. But why, as our elected officials, have you not communicated better with each other? And now you're trying to find solutions. I get that. I'm trying to be reasonable. But you do understand that the decisions you make will impact my daughter's future. It will impact our children's future. And I get it. You're in a bad position. Could this not have been done earlier? And if at least, at best, could there not be a solution where the fourth graders are not at all? Could there be where the fourth graders could go to either one of those schools? And I petition the parents who think this is a real big inconvenience. But as much as it's an inconvenience, imagine what either one of those solutions is going to do to our children. And it's time to not attack the committees, not to attack each other, because, well, my child has an EEP and my child's going into fourth grade. I'm going to root for my kid. You're going to root for yours. Isn't there something that we can come up with and say, hey, fine, let's give the kids the special services they need because they need it for their future. And my child, she can't even say shoot without looking at me and feeling bad. That social worker, she said that crass word, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I'm an adult. And I was taken by it. And I said, my 9-year-old is going to be around middle schoolers, regardless of as much as they try to keep them away. She's going to be privy to all of that. And that is going to impact the kind of future that she's going to have. So I please don't just say, we're willing to talk to them. I'm saying, yesterday I heard at the town council, there's contracts that we have to consider in unions. The teachers have unions. The fire department has unions. Everybody has unions. Where are the kids' union? We are the parents. We're trying to be their union. Nobody's fighting for their contract, their future, and how this is going to impact them. This is our chance, my opportunity to say, hey, can you advocate for our child? Can you be their union? So yes, I'm sorry if it's going to be inconvenient for other parents, but please try not to put, I don't want you to cut services for the kids that need it, because their future is as important as my daughter's future. And I don't care if I have to drive, I don't care if I have to take vacation time, I will do what I can for her future.
Thank
and that's
you.
all I have to say.
So I just want to answer some of your questions or sort of address some of your concerns. Our goal is to do neither of those things. It's to neither close a school nor to cut the services. But the math is the math, and so we need to try and figure out how not to do that. And we, again, are open to any ideas that people have. And just to sort of be clear also, we have been talking about it for 5 years anyway. Yeah, 5 years. We have gone before the budget committee. It's only in the last year that the town council then is the budget making authority. We certainly, brought this up to them last year and in other sort of venues. I think the thing that was never on the table until recently is actually potentially closing a school and moving grades around this way. And again, that really does come back to the cuts in the state aid. That's what's really forced our hand more than anything else. So to the extent that anybody is surprised about potentially closing a school, I count myself there. I'm very surprised as well. But I also see the various forces, both external and internal to the town, that are kind of driving a lot of this. But I do appreciate your concerns, and I share them as well. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, how are you doing? My name's Blake Hayden. I'm from 214 Highland Road, and I did attend Fort Barton School in fourth grade only. I moved here from Fall River. Can you hear me? I know there's been some mic issues tonight, and so I'm a father of two, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old son, and just a couple questions I had. I do want everyone to know that in the future here, I'm going to be running for town council in Tiverton to help use my expertise to solve issues like this and work collaboratively with the school council and the town council and the municipalities so that we can rise the tide together and all succeed, all departments, all divisions, best we can, all making the sacrifices that we need to rise as a town and a community. But one of the questions I did have for the council here today, or the committee, is, it's great that we have such nice volunteers. Like, we have an accountant who, I pay my accountant several $100s an hour, offering his time to help with some of the general ledger, the budget items, the line item items to help us. I know it's only 6 or 7% of the whole budget that we can actually affect, but let's laser focus in on that 6 or 7% and really drill down. And when we have someone with that kind of expertise, and Dr. Larkin, your neighbor, I believe his name was Joe, the gentleman in the purple, my question to you is, are we going to accept their help? It's free help, and these people have expertise that maybe some of you on the council don't, right? Or the committee don't. So are we able to legally leverage those resources and use these people, and can we get commitment from you that you will accept that help?
I think we're always willing to accept any help. I think that the best way that starts is by kind of hearing from them what their ideas are and then communicating with the superintendent and our director of finance. So.
Sure. Well, I mean, was it Joe, your neighbor? Seems
John
like he's,
Souza.
John, he seems like he's got like 50 years of experience doing exactly this. So I would highly, I recommend leveraging that. He's your neighbor too, so guys, I'm sure you chat all the time about it. But those are just the types of things I'm really grateful to see the community step up and offer that additional resource. So I think we should take advantage of it. So we'd love to get commitment from the committee that they will use those
I
resources.
think where we need to be careful is we deal with an awful lot of confidential information. We deal with a lot of specific student and parent situations. We deal with specific names and families attached to out-of-district placements, IEPs, those kind of things. So I think if certainly if we could accept that help in a way that protects that confidential data, and certainly, have people on a volunteer basis, and to Dr. Larkin's point, see what they could do. I don't see why we couldn't at least look into that, just understanding the confidentiality of some of the data that we, and the information that we do deal with, but you could segregate that.
Sure, and I totally understand sensitive data, confidential data, redact it, hide it, do whatever you need to do. But what I'm more talking about is fiscal data, which is public. And as you mentioned earlier today, I think the superintendent had mentioned that that audit and, the general ledger, the 8,000 line items within the tech budget of the $138,000 is available publicly. What is the process to formally request a copy of those records? How do we go about doing that? How do I get a copy of the general ledger of all the 8,000 line items for the $138,000 in the tech budget? How do I obtain that?
Just email me tomorrow, we'll send it to you.
Okay. And anybody else can request that as well? Okay, appreciate it. I just want to make sure. I think what would go a long way is transparency, and I don't think the community's getting the transparency, and I think if we got it, we would feel a lot better. Like, how many pencils did we buy last year? How many highlighters did we buy? How many reams of paper? When it comes to the tech budget, what is that $138,000? Is it software maintenance agreements? Is it service level agreements? Are they repairs, replacements? Is it training? we have a right to know what those are. It's not just $138,000 went to computers. Like, we deserve to know 8,000 line items. If it's 1 million line items, we have the power to use tools like Power BI and analyze data in big data sets, and we are happy to help you analyze the budget and make sure it's accurate and transparent.
I would also recommend, we have a finance subcommittee. You're welcome to come to those. Those are open meetings. They're posted. We look at budget versus actual every month.
I understand.
So I would get those.
I would understand. I would love to get a copy of the audit, the full general ledger, and the budgets versus the actuals. And I do understand it's a living, breathing document, right? Here's what we estimate. Oh no, Staples charged us X more on the ink and toner. A copier broke. Things come out of nowhere, but we can also budget for those surprises as well. But I also,
can I just
Sure.
answer, because I want to answer your question specifically in real time. So the other place I would look is that in the sort of meetings over the course of January, February, and March, each of our department heads, for want of a better word, principals, the tech director, the director of special education, all actually present their budgets to the school committee, and those are on tape at Tivertonvideos on YouTube.
Sure, I know where it is, yeah. And I, just a comment, Mrs. Destrums was actually my math teacher in 6th grade, so great speech. You know, I don't know the principal here, but great speech. I appreciate them all stepping forward to put the good stats up and appreciate everything they do for our students and community. I think, obviously, everyone thinks both options stink. One, we close a school and lose staff. Another, we lose staff. My question to you is, how did we get to those two options, and how many options did we start with? Right? Did we start with 20 and we said, oh, this one's real bad, this one's awful? How do we whittle down to 2 options or 3, as you said, because one could be getting funding approved?
When we started looking at the budget in October, late September for the finance subcommittee, and Amy builds that budget and she says, okay, here's the level funded budget, the 39 million. We look at, here's all we can ask for because we're limited by statute of what we can ask for. Here's the gap. And we went back to Dr. Sanchioni. We asked every principal, every assistant principal. We asked our unions to get involved with that discussion because they're the educational professionals, not me, and come back to us with some options to start the discussion. It was such a large number. So that's how we got those two, is our staff went and asked and did the work that we asked them to do. And we actually put this out sooner than we haven't, we could have. We made a decision, we have to get this out as soon as possible because we want to hear, is there something we're not thinking of? Is there another direction that we can go? Is there, again, I'll say it again, the money that is sitting in a bank somewhere is your money. Do people want us to work with the council to see if we can have a compromise and have some of that money come back to us? So we got that out as soon as we can, but they did that at our direction. Said, you're the educational experts, please come back to us with recommendations.
Sure, and so for the record, how many recommendations did you receive?
They came back with 2.
Only
and
2.
It was a starting point.
And you had a few others on a sheet that you were going to share?
I have just some options that a parent had written to me and asked me to consider.
Would love to hear them.
To the board, and I promised her I would bring them forward because, again, if people have, if there's specific things you want us to go look at our administrators, okay, we hear that, we will. I've heard a couple of other things that, bus companies, we've already went back to our bus companies.
Yeah, I understand the challenge with the bus companies.
Yeah,
where we're tucked into Massachusetts and the gas. And
so we're keeping the options open. We're keeping our ears open. We're trying to think of other alternatives, but we had to start somewhere, and that's where we started.
And just to get to the point of, the timeline of all of this, the state aid issue did not emerge until mid to late January, and I think we were all sort of in a state of denial a little bit. We were trying to work with RIGL and our legislative delegation to see if this could actually possibly be true. And so what you saw over the course of February was the evolution of those two options, and then, as you know, presented at the first meeting in March.
Sure.
So it's only, that we would get to this point with these two bad options has probably been 6 or 7 weeks.
Sure, and I guess the point I'm trying to stress and what everyone's trying to say is, I understand we're a school, we're a government entity, we're not a for-profit, but we need to be creative and think of things like bringing in that rent for those companies that are renting from us, or whatever it may be, charging $2 more at a football game, or whatever it is. We need to find other sources for the revenue to come in. And if we got one idea from every person in here, one of them is going to be a great idea. So, just a point to think outside the box that we are a school, but I mean, maybe we could look at what universities are doing. They're making a ton of money. I know they have tuition, but they're making money outside of just tuition in other ways. So,
Which is part of the reason, and I don't know if you're here, that I said in the beginning, if we could just work together to get us through the immediate crisis so that we could have this larger conversation over the next year and talk about what the community wants on both sides, municipal and school. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'd love to see that happen. Give us the gift of time to be able to have these larger discussions, because without that, by law, we have to balance our budget within 30 days of when we're given our appropriation.
I totally understand that. And then one other suggestion or question, do we have an employee in the school department who just applies for grants and just tries to get us funds all the time? Those one-time funds that we get, because I keep hearing a theme is like, well, we have one-time funds, it's great when we have it, and then the next year we lose it, how do we make up for it? Like, do we have a team of people just trying to secure all these funds all the time? Because it seems like we need to just, when we lose one, I'm a sales manager at DHL, and when you lose an account, man, now you got to go get two to make up for it, because you need one to replace it, backfill it, and then you need another one to grow, right? So it puts us in a really tough position. I'm just curious if maybe we could allocate funds or allocate a resource or get more help to that role. Maybe she's wearing 15 hats and she's not focusing on that role because she's spread too thin. Maybe we can, because one grant could be $1 million or $500,000 or 40 grand, or it could be big numbers. So that would be
larger districts oftentimes have people who are specifically doing that, grant writers.
Totally understand.
You'd be talking about adding another position, which potentially, if it could guarantee you a certain revenue stream, and again, grants are usually very specifically tied to a purpose.
Specific
You're
project,
not going to be able to, you could not, in good conscience, I think, try to run operations over on getting, continuous grant money. The grant people who give grants see through that pretty quickly too.
Sure.
Write a lot of grants?
We do. Outside of our entitlement grants, which are just, we write them, we know we're going to get them, we probably have written, I've written at least 6. I'm sure, Amy, you've written half dozen. Sarah, you've written a couple. So if we see a competitive grant, entitlement competitive, right, and we know we can qualify for it, we write that grant. We've got a couple coming in next year. One of them is going to save a position. We wrote a grant to the Van Buren Foundation for a position. We're very fortunate to receive that. Then we have several others that are going to help us out.
Right, which is the other part of my answer, is that while we don't have a specific person, again, would be adding another position, our principals and our administrators and our teachers actually do write quite a bit of grants and are very successful at getting money. Yeah, we got actually, how much did we get for the security grant?
For the what?
The security grant.
The COPS grant?
Oh, $67,500.
Yeah, so
Awesome.
So we are doing that. It's not likely to solve the.
Sure, I just think the return on investment is there for one employee. Believe me, I'm not trying to add costs, but one employee, and then the teachers can focus on their core competencies, which probably is not grant writing, it's teaching the kids and taking care of the classroom. And we have one person whose salary is probably going to be under 100K, and they secure one grant a year. It's justified, and it's funds to the, to the school. So just an idea. Again, I'm not here with the magic wand. But then one question I also have is, what is the procurement process? So we are going for 1,000 reams of paper from Staples, WB Mason, and office supplies. Are we required to get 3 bids? Can we make that 5 bids? Can we do some things while we're in this economic downturn of trying to squeeze extra pennies out of supplies? I mean, we're talking paper, pencils. I graduated here in 2003. At that time, the teachers were buying their own pencils and highlighters and supplies, so I can't imagine it's really changed, but just a question on that, right? Like, can we maybe get a better bidding process going, a better procurement process with our vendors and suppliers? Are there other GSA contracts we can piggyback off of and get better rates? Can we use aggregate buying power and buy in bulk or wholesale for 2 years instead of 1 year and get a better per unit rate? Just ideas I'm throwing out there to try to help.
So we're required to go out to bid for every purchase over $5,000, $10,000 if it's construction related, or we can buy through a cooperative or a purchasing consortium, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, GPO. Yep.
Or we can also purchase straight off of the master price agreement in Rhode Island. Although the master price agreement isn't always the most cost effective, I can tell you that for like supplies and things like that, I can tell you those are purchased at the school level based on what the principal feels the school needs, but we have, I want to say, a business account with Amazon, Staples, Office Depot, and we do competitively price every purchase that we make. In some instances, we are a captive audience in that there's only one supplier, of sort of one-off items, but we spend an inordinate amount of time comparing prices, bulk purchasing if we can, when we can, and that consumes, I can't tell you how many hours of my week working with the principals. And to the credit, the principals do very well at that. So those are things that we look at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and again, within the purchasing requirements issued by the state.
Sure, I appreciate that explanation. So part of what I do for work is help companies analyze their EBITDA and go line item by line item through their budget in every department they're in: logistics, transportation, office supplies, you name it, through the whole gamut. So any of my expertise that I can lend to you as well, just like John and Brendan, I'd be happy to help. I will email you in the morning, Superintendent. I appreciate the transparency of that. One other suggestion I'd have was, is there a way we can make that general ledger maybe public on the Tiverton Schools website so everybody has access to it and you're not getting 1,000 emails tomorrow? Or is there a way we could put it on a SharePoint site? Just again, in the nature of full transparency, we should have the ability to look right in there and drill right in, just like we can see the town councilor or the town administrator's salary or the DPW, worker's salary. We should be able to line item right in there and say, wow, man, the football team spent twice as much as the soccer team this year, or whatever it may be, and then it is what it is. It's full transparency, and I think that would go a long way. So that's just my suggestion, and I look forward to helping any way I can. Appreciate everything you all do. I know it's a tough crowd lately.
I've seen tougher. Anyway, okay, I am going to move on to item 7.
Jerry, I think, remember, we had some, again, I don't expect any commentary on them because I understand I'm bringing them, but I think, Diane, you had one as well. And we'll keep it quick, but Diane,
Okay.
Did you want to go first?
Yeah, I want to be cognizant of the hour.
And this did not come to me from a constituent, this came out of my little...
Diane, you need to closer.
Oy. Loving this microphone thing tonight, really, I am. As a resident of this town for nearly 50 years and a graduate of the schools, I'm keenly aware of the history of our schools. And I hate to date myself that well. But, in thinking about if we are forced to close down Fort Barton because our budget constraints dictate that. As I've heard loud and clear the concerns over 4th grade going to the middle school. Our administration would do their very best, but we've heard the concerns. So, I was thinking about this back in, when this high school first came into existence, it was grades 7 through 12. I can tell you my husband spent 6 years in high school. It was junior, senior high school at the time. Yeah. So, looking at that and saying to myself, well, gee, if, perhaps we could consider, and this is just something, for discussion on another day, if we are forced to actually take this action, could we consider perhaps at the 2 remaining elementary schools, doing pre-K through 2, running 3 to 6 at what's currently the middle school, and 7 through 12 at the high school? Just something to consider. I don't know. I am not an educator, and I will be the first to admit it. I don't know the impact on the education to the kids, and that's something I'd want to hear back on. But I'm thinking it may alleviate some of the concerns over the busing and may actually allow us to put the children who are more close in age, keep them together. So that it is. I wouldn't expect really any feedback from this tonight, just throwing it out there.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a couple of parents email me different suggestions, and I did, again, not an educator, and I did say I will bring them forward. One person, let me start with this one, really small, that I know, that they would like to see each elementary, if we do have to close an elementary, they would like to see at each elementary pre-K through 3. And then they would like to see a learning academy of 4th and 5th graders created at the middle school that would be modeled off Gade Middle School in Middletown. The second suggestion, wow, this is tiny, is they want to know why we don't follow the Little Compton model, keep all K through 8 at elementary and middle school as currently stands, and look at tuitioning out our 9th through 12th graders.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Farnworth and Mrs. Palish. And I'm trying to remember my password. But I think we're up to item 7 something. B, receive legal advice. So Attorney Scungio, maybe you could sort of review with us what we spoke about earlier in executive.
Sure. Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me okay?
Get close, yeah, like or have a resident.
I'll take a
voice
lesson
offline.
from you all. So the chair and the school committee, of the school committee and superintendent asked me to provide information and legal advice regarding a question relative to funding. And that question was whether or not legally the town council can increase the aid to education beyond a 4% cap. So in doing that and finding an appropriate response for it, I looked at all the relevant statutes. By statute, the school committee is limited in terms of its request to proposing a budget under 4% or under of the funds that the town would allocate to them and not state funds. So the school committee is limited to a 4% cap.
Request.
Yes, in terms of its proposed budget. The town council, however, has no such limit. They can allocate or reallocate any amount of funds that they wish to give to education for the school committee. So the amount that they could give you could be 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, or 10%, and they have to decide based on the resources they have how much to allocate to aid to education without a limit.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions from any member of the committee? Okay, thank you. Attorney Scungio. Yep.
Dr. Larkin, there was a second piece to this. Well, I mean, Attorney Scungio's been with us all evening. There was also the second question, does the town of Tiverton have the legal authority to prevent the school committee from discontinuing the use of a specific site?
That's correct. I also researched that topic for you. Both of those legal opinions are provided in a correspondence that I gave to you. The town council does not have authority to prevent you from closing the school.
Okay, thank you. All right, without further questions, I'm going to table item 7C unless any objection from the committee. And I'm going to ask for motion under 7D to accept the ACT grant.
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll
Second.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Any discussion? Mrs. Farnworth?
No.
Mr. Dakotas?
I just like to always thank Steve. He's really good to us. He's good to our Little League. He's good to Tiverton Junior Basketball. Thank you for what you do in helping with youth and high school sports.
Mrs. Pavo? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
And Mrs. Palish?
Yes, but could I ask just to get a teeny bit of information about it?
Sure. Yeah, we wrote a grant.
Just short.
Sure. It's for our soccer goals are unusable anymore, so we wrote a grant, and they funded a brand-new soccer goal for our boys and girls teams for next year. So, again, I ask you to accept this grant with gratitude.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yes.
I do have one follow-up question. In the backup, it mentioned that this is for boys soccer. Is there a plan to have a girls soccer team as well?
Depending on numbers, I think the AD is trying to evaluate that. But the goal will be used for our varsity team, our JV team, and any team that's playing soccer.
Okay, I mean, I'll just remind everyone too, right? We have Tiverton Youth Soccer. That's an active league in town, and I've said it before, that I just worry that we are kind of duplicating the service here. And granted, it's via grant, but as something that's sustained, I would be concerned, as well as the fact that this is directed specifically to the boys only.
Can I follow up on that, Dr. Sanchioni? Just real quick, this is a soccer net. It doesn't matter if the boys are using it or the girls.
Yeah,
just
the
soccer
grant
net.
just requires us, the way the act
So
grant
you're just saying the way it was
specifically
written.
says boys.
No, this is part of my clarification.
He said boys and girls.
No, it says just boys on the grant. But the grant requires us to only identify one team. It doesn't mean it can only be used by that team. It's just the way ACT asked us to submit grants, so that we're not sending in grants for duplicate teams. So we just sort of cherry pick a team every now and then for a grant.
Okay.
But
So-
whatever the product is, or whatever they fund, it can be used globally.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it does say that in the letter of award that the sports should be available to everybody. So I don't know if that means for the grant as well, but, okay. I actually have to
Except
vote.
with gratitude.
All right. I didn't vote. Who am I? Why am I here? I vote yes. All right. Where are we?
Future meetings.
Future meetings. We have our joint meeting with the Tiverton Town Council on April 1st, which will be harmonious. We have our school committee meeting on April 9th and a finance subcommittee meeting on April 23rd. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn before anybody else can say anything else.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? We're adjourned.